Hello, everyone, and welcome to part 4, which you might think is the end, but it's not, of the Dynasty ranking series with Davis Mattek, myself, Pat Kerrane, Jakob Sanderson. You're either listening to this on the SportsGrid Fantasy Football Podcast feed, the legendary Upside Fantasy Football Podcast feed, or the Full Tilt Dynasty Podcast feed. We're here. Today is quarterbacks and tight ends. Then next week, or maybe later this week, depending on our schedules, we're going to be doing a mailbag show. But guys, today, quarterbacks and tight ends, I expect there to be less really voracious arguments here today. I think we're mostly in line. But what is so interesting is finding a middling guy at these positions. Middling guys at running back and wide receiver, that's not really what's going to win you dynasty leagues. But finding the quarterback 28 who turns into the quarterback 16 for 6 years, just such a dub. Finding the next Derek Carr, huge win. Finding, TJ Hawkinson. I guess
Ryan Tannehill. Ryan Tannehill was a massive win.
Yeah.
Trading for Ryan Tannehill with a late second round pick, like 2 weeks into him starting with the Titans, is like still one of the greatest trades I've ever made in my home dynasty league. Like it still like brings me joy to my heart to think of Ryan Tannehill, and he's freaking Ryan Tannehill.
And the crazy thing about tight ends is that they can come from anywhere. Draft capital has a really low R squared with like points.
Yeah.
So, we're talking like guys like Darren Waller, guys like Dalton Schultz, guys like Kittle. Sure. Kittle. Great example.
Gary Barnidge.
Yes.
That's the other thing about tight end. It'll fool you too.
Right. Well, that's the other thing
wonders.
Buying the peak on these guys happens frequently,
or buying the rise, right? Like, there's always kind of the young, like ascendant Ladarius Green type that never quite gets there. Or Mike Gesicki had a little. How many
times?
Okay, here we go.
How many times has someone traded a future first for David Njoku, thought they won that trade, and then later realized that they lost that trade, and then came back around again
this off season, and then the next part's next off season? Yeah.
Exactly.
Oh, it's so good.
There's so many like indexes in tight end. It's like there's like the Gary Barnidge index for like the guy who's randomly is tight end 6 1 year and you don't think you're ever going to hear from him again. Like you just mentioned, there's like the Ladarius Green index for like the young guy who never breaks out. There's like the Njoku index where it's like, oh, like he's this guy that like thought was going to be great, and then you get the flop lag. And
Evan Ingram from the same class. We got Evan Ingram, in the same class.
Exactly. Yeah. And then you get the Jonnu Albert O contingent where it's like, oh man, this guy's a 27% targets per route run. Wait until he gets all the routes. Then he never gets all the routes. Like there's just so many of these guys. That guy. Tig scores really highly in the Albert O decks.
He does. Yeah.
Oh man. Yeah.
We'll talk about him soon, I'm sure.
Yeah. Corporate wants you to find the difference between these two pictures, Chig and Albert O. They're the same picture. So I guess probably the most interesting thing is that no one disagreed that Mahomes is clearly the number one asset overall in this format. And like a guy like that, who is just when available, going to score so many points, could tear his ACL tomorrow. There would be no change in how the market viewed him. I traded away Patrick Mahomes in a league last offseason, and I clearly lost this trade on the sense of value, right? Because I don't really think you can give the value there. But oftentimes guys like that are such great trade bait and leverage because you can totally remake your team in doing so. And
do you want to share the trade real quick? Because I almost feel like you did a public service by trading Mahomes, because like no one trades Mahomes in Superflex leagues. Like it's difficult.
It's really difficult. Like even amongst the top 3, and it's such a top 3 and underdog, right? Between those 3 guys, or we're doing Scott Fishbowl today. Like it's clearly a top 3, but in Dynasty, it's the liquidity that's so different. Like you go and ask for Patrick Mahomes. Usually the answer is get the fuck out of here. Whereas you ask for Josh Allen, and it's like, you have to pay me a lot, but like, it's at least possible. Like I've traded for Josh Allen, traded for him yesterday.
So I had buried myself into such a hole with this team that it was basically impossible for me to get out of it other than trading Patrick Mahomes. I'm trying to find the exact trade. I think I have to go back to the prior year on MFL. But basically it equated to I traded away for 2 years of first round picks, a young wide receiver. Now that young wide receiver ended up being Elijah Moore, so he immediately lost all his value. And I got Geno Smith in this trade, huge win, right?
Nice.
Nope, I sold
There you
low
go.
on Geno Smith when we
Oh.
thought he was getting benched for Drew Lock. But it was basically for a surplus of picks and a way. My roster was so top heavy and it was all picks based. And
I
basically
have it
was
here
like,
if you want me to read it off.
Yes, please.
Okay. So Davis traded away Patrick Mahomes, Mecole Hardman, MVS, and Noah Fant. And he got back Geno Smith, Elijah Moore, Jameson Williams, Ricky Seals-Jones for some reason. A 2023.
It was to make the math.
It was to make it work. Okay.
Yeah.
A 2020.
Was this the NBA? He was like a
Well,
salary.
why
matching?
did Gretsch even have Ricky Seals-Jones? 2023 round one.
Gretsch now.
2023 round 2 and a 2023 round 3.
Can you summarize that again? Only with assets that matter.
Yeah,
I got lost in the Ricky Seals sauce.
So a first, a second, and a third in the following year because
Okay.
this went down to 2022.
Yeah.
Geno, Elijah Moore, Jameson Williams,
Is this a one?
and then he gave Mahomes.
This is a
Mahomes is
two-quarterback
really the
league?
only major asset you gave.
Yeah, I can't say that I'm with you here, Davis. I consider Mahomes to be worth 5 first-round picks in a super flex dynasty league.
I did too. No, I did too. So this is getting into the weeds of this very specific league, but people are going to run into this in their own experiences, which is that there are only maybe 3 or 4 teams in this league. Really, at the time I traded it, there was really only 2 teams that had any interest in winning. They had traded every pick they had for the next 2. They didn't even have 6-round picks to give for the next 2 years. They had no picks available. Gretsch looks at the balance of the league, says, you know what, I'm going to go for it. And my thought was, sure, I can sit on Mahomes for 1 billion years. My team is just going to continue to be shit, and I'm going to have no impetus to change it. And I did turn Jameson Williams into Cooper Kupp for whatever that is worth. And my team, Pat is in this league, is much better now. I mean,
his team is much better. Yeah,
there's a chance I can win it this year. Now, obviously, I totally agree with you, but I also think every time you trade Mahomes, you are going to lose because no person is going to pay what a trade calculator would say he is worth, I think.
So I've only traded away Mahomes once, and I've only traded for Mahomes once. And interestingly, they're actually in the same league 2 years apart. And it was, same deal as you. Like I was in just a horrendous spot. Like I had gone pretty all-in-y out of the startup, and then I drafted a lot of dudes who died even faster than I expected.
See, mine was the opposite. I went all in, productive struggle, and then it died. A bunch of guys with the few assets I had died on the vine, like CH 101 in the Dynasty draft, yada, yada.
Yeah. So I traded Mahomes, and I got, at that time, I got a first-round pick in that current year, which ended up being Olave, which that was kind of fluky that I got him at 108, but we'll take it. And then 2 2023 firsts. I think one ended up being fairly early, one ended up being kind of late, and Smith and Hollywood Brown. So we just got a bunch of dudes. And then I was lucky enough this year to be able to then actually retrade for Mahomes with Garrett Wilson in the 103, which I thought was a nice win on a combination. But obviously you can't count on being able to get Mahomes back. I do agree with trading Mahomes only in the circumstance where, if your team is bad, right? If you think about it like you're investing, if you're an already rich person, the best thing you want to do is you want to protect your money. So putting it in Mahomes is the safest possible stock. It's a bond. It's a bond that cannot fail. Exactly. So it's the best possible place to put your value. But by proxy, if you are not in a good spot, if we say the median value of a dynasty team in your league is 100 and you're at 70, so you're deeply underwater, and then 30% of your value is in Patrick Mahomes, that's just not a very good spot to be, because now the other 70% of your team basically has to improve its value almost by double, because you're not getting any value increase out of the Mahomes. He just is what he is. He can't go up.
That was the key that finally got me to take a below market deal. Was I was sure, I can hold this golden ticket, this whatever, but it's never going to turn into that much of a difference. I'm not going to gain any value over replacement in other spots or whatever. Like, I just am going to get 26 points per game at quarterback in perpetuity.
So I do agree with you. Like, I totally think like these players shouldn't be untradeable. I've had this argument with other people. If people follow at Coops FFB, Cooper Adams, we have like a 2-year running debate over whether bad teams should trade Patrick Mahomes, and I'm on the side that you should. And it's the same with all these elite quarterbacks, but it's definitely a last resort situation to me, because realistically, like, if you trade everything else for draft picks, you should be able to accrue value. So you have to be, I think, deeply underwater to want to trade the Mahomes or the Josh Allen or the Jalen Hurts. I would certainly make that my last resort play, but like I said, I have done it a couple times when I'm in a deeply disadvantageous position. It is interesting, like I said, how much less liquid I find Patrick Mahomes to be. Like I've traded for Josh Allen a handful of times this offseason. It obviously costs a ton, but like, it is something you can do. Like, I think a lot of times if you go to the Josh Allen or the Jalen Hurts owner and you're like, I want to pay up for them, it is more possible than it is with Mahomes. I don't know if you guys find that as well or not.
Well, I would say the difference between, like, the one I think about those guys, I'm like, why would I, I think it's interesting that we all three have Mahomes as the top guy. And the reason that I see it that way is that, like, this is not a time to take on like even any risk.
Even a 3% risk that Josh Allen gets hurt running, or that Jalen Hurts is a B- passer instead of a B+ passer. Like, there's
exactly
you cannot do it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because it's to the point you made earlier of like, we're trying to, like, if you're gonna, this is the 101 in Superflex, right? The number one quarterback's the 101 in Superflex. You want to have your money invested very, very safely. And with Mahomes, he puts out a ton of points. It's not like you're really losing, if you're losing up maybe a hair of upside compared to Jalen Hurts or something. But I do lean on your side of the bad team debate, Jakob, because it's like, this will change eventually. Like, Patrick Mahomes turns 28 in September. I think his like bulletproof status will change in the next couple years. When you're talking about a guy,
like 3 years left. Once it says 30, then maybe it changes a little bit.
Or even once it's turning 30, right? Like, he's going to turn 30.
He's probably going to like win MVP the year he turns 30. Like, I don't, I think it's like, so like, Rodgers, despite sort of having those seasons in the desert where he got hurt and Green Bay missed the playoffs and stuff, he didn't really start tanking in ADP until how the market viewed him, until Adams left.
Sorry, I only mean in the sense that, like, there's no question that you would take him over Hurts. That you would, like, when he gets to his, he's like 29 going on 30 type season, I could see then going, you know what? I'm at this point, I'm going to, like, Caleb Williams has had an incredible start to his career. I'm just going to go him,
I think that you're like right and wrong at the same time, in the sense that I think that you're totally right that that's what's going to happen. And I also think that will be incorrect for those who do that. Like,
I've correctly predicted a stupid thing to do.
Yeah, I think that's my take on it. Like, when did you guys start playing Dynasty? Is the question.
20,
like, pretty hardcore was like
12. I think 2011 or 2012.
Yeah,
I think my start was in 2011.
Okay, so we're gonna leave Pat at the door here. Davis, I think we talked about this pre-show one time. We were similar. It was like 2018 or something like that. 2018.
When was CD's first season? Maybe the year before
CD was 20. The Mecole Hardman draft was 2019. Davis, I know everything works before that, according to the Hardman Bible.
So 2017 was probably my first year then.
Okay. It was 2012 because I was in
2017. Great. 2017. That is like 1 year. That's Alvin Kamara's rookie year, who is like now probably reaching the end of his career. It feels like Alvin Kamara has been in our lives for a very long time. Like, and that's only been 6 years. 6 years from now, Patrick Mahomes is probably still going to be entirely in his prime as a quarterback, and Jonathan Taylor might be out of the NFL. Like, the quarterback,
Jonathan Taylor will be out of the NFL.
Yeah, like it's probably he'll either be out of the NFL or he'll be like, I don't know, like hanging on, right? Like it's not going to be, he'll be 30.
He'll be on the Chiefs practice squad like Melvin Gordon.
Exactly. Like Bijan Robinson is going to be past the age cliff when Patrick Mahomes is still in his prime. I think like people struggle sometimes to capture just how vast the difference is between quarterback aging curves and running back, and frankly, even wide receiver aging curves. Like Patrick Mahomes is going to be fine. I think that 5 years into the future, like seems like a quicker time than it actually is in effect. Like it seems like I've been playing Dynasty forever, and really I've been playing it for like half a decade.
But part of Dynasty is understanding what people sort of systemically do wrong and then taking advantage of that and also not fighting it, right? Like sometimes, like, you know, there's kind of been pushback on, you know, the veteran wide receivers. Like, hey, these veteran wide receivers, they age better than people think or whatever. And I think kind of your mileage will vary on in terms of like how true that even is. But the point with me is like, okay, fine, but the market is still going to completely lose interest in these guys when they're 31, and I can get them back when they're 32 for nothing. So why wouldn't I play that game? I think Mahomes is so interesting because it is a real question of like how long can he be the 101? Like, can he be the 101 at 33? Like, he probably can't. So
that's the thing, is so little of his profile is based on rushing. Like he'll run a little bit, but not really. And if you really wanted to be a bull, you could argue that actually the theory of him throwing to a 34-year-old tight end and a bunch of jabronis, like eventually Kansas City will actually get competent wide receivers. And then like imagine what it would look like when he has, you know, like 3 competent wide receivers playing with him. Like maybe it gets even more high flying.
That's actually really scary.
Yeah, they already have them. Their names are Kadarius Toney and Sky Moore.
Oh no! You have best ball blinders on, but like to hear it that way.
I said that in the most like beleaguered voice. Like I was like, it wasn't even like I was doing it in like I have a good bit voice. It was like, no, Sky Moore is good.
Sky Moore is rising. His ADP is on the rise.
He threw for 50 touchdowns last year with like the average length of average distance of a touchdown being like 5.5 yards or something. Like this, if Mahomes wanted to, and they got some good players, he could throw for 6,000 yards or 60 touchdowns or whatever. Yeah. Like if they decide to go that direction. Well,
because also he never takes sacks ever. So like almost every drop back, like I was literally just doing AFC West projections yesterday, and like I was like, I think it's like you can potentially project Mahomes for like the league low in sacks, but also the most attempts. Like it's like just insane. That's like crazy. So like no play is wasted. Like every play that Patrick Mahomes gets the ball in his hands, like produces fantasy points, or it's an incompletion, and then the next play produces fantasy points 5 seconds of real time later.
Yeah, he's in a perfect system. They're aggressive. Like the weapons could improve. Like even with Kelsey aging out soon, like the wide receivers are so poor.
There's a small buying window when Kelsey is done. Maybe there's like a very minuscule Mahomes buy window when let's say Allen and Hurts blow up again this year, and maybe Joe Burrow has like his best ever statistical season or something, and the Chargers run 1 billion plays, and Kelsey looks kind of slow, and the Chiefs, don't win the Super Bowl. Maybe this upcoming offseason, maybe there's like Mahomes is like the quarterback 4 or whatever for like a month in dynasty rankings.
I mean, there's been buy windows. Like Mahomes wasn't the QB1 101 overall in dynasty ADP the last 2 years. Like it was Josh Allen, and people were debating Justin Herbert versus Patrick Mahomes this time last year. Like it feels like all of Patrick Mahomes' career, there's been these challengers, and Josh Allen's really the only one who has been a sustained challenger. Like everyone else, it seems like they come up and it's Mahomes or this guy for like 1 year, and then that other guy kind of fades back to the middle of the first. Allen, with respect to Allen, like he's now stayed there right with Mahomes for 3 years. I think that's legit, but there has been challengers. There will be again. Like, man, if I could add like a 2nd round pick to Jalen Hurts and just get Patrick Mahomes, I'd be pumped up to do that. I just think that's like paying a very minimal insurance cost when you consider how much you're you're investing in that asset. So I don't know. I don't think that I think Mahomes will be attainable again. It's just he's coming off such a good season, and the real life Super Bowl effect seeps into it too.
Yes.
I also think that with Mahomes, one of the reasons that he's so valuable and just such a good place to have, especially if you're not even like truly contending, but as long as you're in the mix, a really nice place to have a lot of your team value, is like if he were to lose value, he probably declines to the price that you would sell him at today if you were like intent on selling it, right? Like he just declines to what any reasonable person would be willing to give you.
You're getting minimum of a good first and a good player who's like a younger than 24. Like there's no world in which you're getting less than that. Yeah,
exactly. Well, even if he has like a bad year,
it's almost the same effect as like NBA with max contracts. Like, so on my ranks, if you see my individualized ranks on my Substack, like I do a base first ranking system for every player where a base first just means a first in a future year that has equal opportunity of being any of the 12 slots. And essentially I equate each tier to like how many base firsts or base seconds they would be worth. And once I start getting into this upper tier, I just put a plus because I don't think you can like actively quantify. So like it's like I have like 3 is kind of my max on like a reel, and then it's like 3+, 4+, and I have Mahomes like 5+. And it's kind of the idea of like an NBA max contract where you can literally, by the rules, only pay so much. Like Davis was saying, like there's only so many people that have so many assets. But for a lot of NBA players, like their fair value is the max contract. And so it's like, would I want to give 4 first-round picks to pay Jaylen Brown his fair value on a contract? Like I probably wouldn't. But for Patrick Mahomes, like just the privilege of his liquidity has value. Like even if he doesn't actually trade at a lower cost, just the privilege of being able to acquire his services has inherent value. And so I think like
it's a weird liquidity, sort of a weird term with him because he's liquid in the sense that you could always
find a deal for him, but you don't always want to pull the trigger though. So that's the illiquidity.
Right. But he's very hard to acquire.
Yeah, but you're also like, he's not cash. Like you're not going to be able to go exchange him for exactly the amount of value written on the bill. It's like, in that sense, it's not liquid. It's going to take a lot of doing, but in the sense that the other partner in that trade wants to do the doing, Mahomes, they do.
Like a rare crypto punk. Like we're saying he's like one of the really good rare crypto punks where it's like, sure, you could always sell him for the floor, but ideally you'd be getting a little bit more.
I guess like what I mean by this is like, okay, so every offseason I want to have more elite quarterbacks. Like they just provide the most value over replacement in Superflex League. They also sustain their value better than any other position. You always want to be investing in them highly. Like if you go into an offseason, and I kind of did this offseason, you're like, I would like to drastically increase my ownership exposure to Lamar Jackson. Like you can do that. You probably have to pay a lot for him, but you will do that. Like you just start sending a lot of offers for Lamar Jackson. You will start to buy Lamar Jacksons. Like it's a lot harder to do that with a Mahomes or a Josh Allen. Like you have spots. Like I have plenty of dynasty teams. Maybe plenty is overestimating it. I have several dynasty teams where it's like I have a lot of value edge over the rest of the league. The only thing that I really am interested in acquiring is like those truly elite separating assets. If I had to pay 7 first-round picks for Patrick Mahomes, I would pay 7 first-round picks for Patrick Mahomes. It's just I literally can't. Like there's nothing that the other owner will accept. So like, and it would be the same for Allen or Hurts. Like, so I don't think there's like a price that is inherently too much depending on the position you're in. If I'm like the 6th most valuable team in the league, yeah, I'm not sending 5 first-round picks for Patrick Mahomes. But if you're the most valuable team, if you have the most value of any team in your league, like I don't know that I can tell you like you shouldn't pay X for Patrick Mahomes. Like there might not be a price because there's teams like out there in some dynasty leagues where it's like you have like Treylon Burks as like the 4th wide receiver on your bench. So it's like, what good does he do? Like throw him in a trade for Patrick Mahomes. Like you can't, you have to do something with that value.
And the other thing about, this is a kind of an approach that I learned from watching Sean Siegel for a number of years. It's like if you can take the future value of your team and move it into the current season, then you gain a huge edge in terms of your ability to win the league. Obviously, right? That's the win now thing. But most people go and they do that. They take all their future picks and they go get, Saquon Barkley and Najee Harris and stuff. And it's like, okay, but now you've taken all your future value and invested it in guys who are going to lose a lot of value very quickly, you're going to be left with no value. But there's almost no amount of future value that you can, like, there's no limit to the amount that makes sense to go get Patrick Mahomes, because he's going to retain that value and he's going to be putting that value into your team. And then you're also going to continue to get, there'll be new picks that will come along as time progresses. Like, you just get awarded those just exist. So it's like one of those things where it's probably a good move. If you're in the situation of, I think I'm in position to be a Mahomes buyer, but I have to add this 2026 first, like just add it, dude. Do it.
Yeah. I'm curious, where do you guys draw the tiers for like the top? What do we have? We have a top 5.
Mahomes tier of himself.
Different. Okay.
Mahomes tier of himself. Burrow or Allen and Hurts, same tier. The next tier of Burrow, Herbert, Lamar, separate tier. Lawrence tier of his own. Then Fields, Watson, Richardson, and Dak. And then I just put Kyler in like who the fuck knows? I don't know what to do. I mean, I know.
Right.
It's just the combination
alone on Kyler.
The combination of the injury, getting no points from him this year, which does matter to his subjective trade value. New coach. They're probably going to have the number 1 overall pick, so they might be able to draft this like literally generational prospect. So he might be on a new team the next time you're getting points from him. Like I could see any argument on Kyler, and then after Kyler and Dak, I think it enters into a much more, like, you got to have nuanced takes on every single guy. I think it all gets different after that.
Yeah, to me, it's Mahomes, tier of 1. Allen, I also given his own tier. Like, I get that Hurts should be there, but I just think track record for me, like, we've seen 3 elite seasons from Josh Allen. We've seen 1 from Jalen Hurts. I just prefer, all else being equal, to invest in the guy we've seen 3 elite seasons from. And then it's like Hurts so it's like almost 3 guys in their own tier for me, with small differences between them. And then, then it's Jackson, Burrow, Herbert, Lawrence for me. And then we're into Watson, Fields. And Kyler's kind of his own thing, because, the mileage you get out of Kyler very much depends on your team circumstances.
Well, let's talk Lamar, because we have a little bit of a difference of opinion on him. I have him 7th. You have him 4th, Jacob, but Davis has him 12th. He does just kind of have that one amazing season. He's a true mobile quarterback where, like, it could fall off soon.
That's all it is for me, is that we're talking about a lot of these guys on 10-year horizons or whatever. And the points I expect Lamar to outscore Herbert, Lawrence, the guys right behind him by quite a bit. For example, I'm also lower on Fields and Watson than you guys. Like, the guys where even if I'm wrong, even if Lamar doesn't have a cliff, I think the market perceives the cliff that way. And the market is also, I think, very sensitive to Lamar's injuries, right? I just have seen this in the, like, if Lamar turns his ankle in week 5 this year, and even if he comes back, I just think people are because it's been so repeated. And not only has it been repeated, but it's also confirming people's priors, which is that a guy like Lamar is going to get hurt more often than Trevor Lawrence is going to get hurt. Even if it's not true, even if the play Lamar got hurt on was a pocket pass, it just does not matter. It feeds into people's perceptions. And I think Lamar is sort of the illiquid argument in a worse way than Mahomes, which is that the person who has him doesn't want to trade him for less than what, quote unquote, a fair value in terms of future value would be. But they also, if you have him and he does have one of these dips, he gets hurt, or just sucks at passing for a 6-week stretch or whatever, you are going to have a harder time moving him for what you think is fair.
So my pushback to that is, I'm going to take the first half of your sentence. The person who has him doesn't want to trade him. And then I'm just inserting a period. It's me. I'm the person who has him. I don't want to trade him. So like, I just like, I don't know. I just don't really mind like the market value argument. Like, I stray more from the market on these top 10 quarterbacks, because I just don't really care. Like, I care more about the market value of assets that I'm eventually going to want to trade. But usually,
and assets that will lose a lot of value quickly. I think you really want
to
assets that have the potential to lose a lot of value quickly. You really want to be focused on, if I'm wrong, what happens? And in running backs, like if you're wrong, it can really pound you in the face on, except a couple of other, maybe there's like 2 or 3 exceptions to that. And those 2 or 3 exceptions then become very appealing. But a quarterback, if you're wrong, you don't tend to lose nearly as much value.
Yeah. And also like, that's just always what I want to do with my dynasty teams. Like if I'm right about a wide receiver, like a rookie wide receiver, the first thing that then enters my mind is how can I transition this wide receiver into a package for a top 10 quarterback? So like once I'm at the Lamar stage, like I'm not really trying to do anything else. Like any of my elite quarterbacks, it's like ultimately my absolute end goal is would be to have Patrick Mahomes in every roster. But like underneath that, it's like I would like to get to any of these top 10 guys. Once I have those top 10 guys, if I think any of them are overvalued amongst each other, then that's my chance to use a Herbert or a Lawrence to push up and get an Allen or a Hurts. And if I think that they're a little bit undervalued, then I just want to keep them because I'm really happy. Like that's how I want to be investing my high value assets in every dynasty league is into these guys. So to me, it's like, if I think Lamar Jackson is undervalued, I don't really care. Like I'll just have more. I would be perfectly content having 60% exposure to Lamar Jackson across my dynasty leagues if I got to that point, unless he became an entirely different player. But I don't think he's going to be. Like, sure, at some point in time, if the rushing dries up and the passing remains stable, he probably doesn't provide that scoring edge that he has so far. But I don't think that his timeline for that, like I mentioned earlier with the quarterback aging curves, like is his timeline for that faster approaching than like actively young wide receivers and their age cliff? Like I'm just not convinced that it actually is. Even if we just average out this season, like, people talk a lot about the 2019 season and it being a bit of an outlier. It is an outlier in terms of his overall output. If you just average his per game scoring over the last 4 years, he's at 23.3 points per game. That's inclusive of games that he departed early with injuries, which there's a couple of. And if you just grade that out over the last 4 seasons, it would have been QB4, QB2, QB6, QB3. So he's giving you reliably one of the 2 to 8 most valuable points over replacement seasons almost every year on average. He now gets the best offensive
that's after
coordinator.
you take away his MVP year.
That's inclusive of his MVP year.
Oh,
it's inclusive of it's MVP year and the other 3 years. But like, and he still has this immense ceiling. We saw him put up 40 twice last year. He now gets the best offensive coordinator he's ever had. He probably has the best weapons that he's ever had. I mean, I think every time you have Lamar Jackson, your expectation is going to be mid QB1, and he still has the highest scoring season in 2019 of any player by over 2 points per game in 4-point passing touchdown leagues since Underdog debuted as an app. So I still think that he has just a truly outsized ceiling that I'm super excited about. If you're ranking in like 6-point touchdown leagues or point per completion or point per first down, like I can see the argument for him behind some of these pocket passers. But otherwise, like I'm pretty excited about Lamar's true ceiling being considerably higher than Burrow, Herbert, Lawrence. And so I would draft him as such.
I think I agree with the base assumption, but disagree with the conclusion, just basically for longevity and trade value concerns. And also, I think specifically in the case of Lawrence and Herbert, Lawrence, I think, has enough rushing that he's going to have plenty of ceiling games, like he'll have like 404-ish while he remains young. And Herbert, I'm starting to get the sense that having a real offensive coordinator is going to be like unbelievable for him. Now, just in general, quarterbacks who do not run for 1,000 yards and 8 touchdowns a year score less than those who do, though. So like your base assumption is correct.
It's the floor and the ceiling is the thing. Like Lamar Jackson's floor is at least
providing a, maybe not league winning, but a pretty demonstrable value over replacement. Like he's at least going to be like the QB8.
Yeah.
Whereas like we just saw Justin Herbert not be a QB1 last year.
Yeah.
Right. Like if Justin Herbert runs cold on touchdown rate, or Trevor Lawrence, Trevor Lawrence hasn't even actually done it. It's really a projection. But if Trevor Lawrence and Justin Herbert, like if they're not really hitting the efficiency as a passer that at this point we can solidly rely on from like a Patrick Mahomes, like they're not demonstrably different than Kirk Cousins in that given season. Obviously the value of that, but like there's a certain point where like sometimes you look up at Justin Herbert's box score, and if he's not running hot on efficiency, you're like, I'm paying a lot for the privilege of having Kirk Cousins, but for 10 years, which is a little scary. Like I never feel that way about Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, the thing with, like, I talk a lot about how I don't want to have to be right in Dynasty, and it's a year-to-year game, and you want to be able to play it like a year-to-year game. I do think with these elite quarterbacks, I said earlier that the quarterback's not going to lose value like the skill positions. I meant the elite quarterback, because you can lose a lot of value at quarterback, but generally these elite. Yeah, exactly. It can get rough. But I think the key question with Lamar is, because the market is probably going to get a little bit scared of him from time to time. Anytime he has an injury, anytime he's coming off a bit of a down year, if he runs 2 years from now, if his rushing craters and it just is total noise, people will treat it as a signal of his aging. And so you're going to have to deal with that. I think the question is how big of a concern is that really? Michael Vick gives me a little bit of hope in the sense that like he was into his big Philly seasons weren't until his early 30s.
Right.
And Lamar, is an underrated passer. I think his best skill is his rushing ability, but he is an underrated passer. If he can take a step forward as a passer this year, if the offense can take a step forward and utilize him a little bit more traditionally as a passer, not hide him so much as a passer, then I think like he could actually gain a little bit of value. He could kind of move into that like Hurts tier if the market kind of regains some confidence. So I definitely want to be on the buying side of Lamar. I don't have him quite as high as you do, Jacob, but I do want to be overweight.
For the record, Lamar Jackson is my highest owned player in Dynasty.
Okay. I like that. I think that's
definitely a stand for sure.
I mean, when he throws for 400 yards and 3 touchdowns and runs for another one in week 1, you're going to be feeling on top of the world. And then it's going to be November 5th, and he's not going to play it in a month, and Harbaugh's going to be at a press conference, and he's going to be like, yeah, we haven't heard, Lamar, he's doing his thing. He hasn't been in the building, but like, it's fine. We're not worried about it.
Sign the contract, Davis. It's fine.
He got the contract. It's a different world.
It's fine.
Yeah, so another interesting. One thing I would say is I would not be fucking buying on Justin Fields at these prices at all.
No, I'm not either.
I ranked him where I think is fair, very high. I think where he's going is fair, but I just do not want to be the holder of that asset. I think that he and Richardson and Richardson honestly I think is even more insulated, obviously because he's younger, but Fields,
he's definitely more interested, right? Insulated, sorry.
Yes. Like Corinne, you and I have talked about this plenty, but like the Bears could like not pick up his option. Like they could just be like, just be like, nah, it's all good.
That would be, he'd have to really struggle this year for that to happen, because
if he played like he's played the entire time that he's been in the NFL.
They were 3-13 last year. Like it's simply not a stretch.
I have no other
for
counter.
him to. It's him. It's totally possible for him to be like a good, pay off his underdog price tag or whatever. The Bears suck shit, and they're like, we're just sick of this. We got to do something else.
If Trey Lance was drafted to the Chicago Bears and Justin Fields was drafted to the San Francisco 49ers, is there any meaningful difference in how their careers would have played out? Like in terms of, is Trey Lance just what Fields is right now in Chicago, and is Fields what Lance is in San Francisco?
Lance is a different type of runner. Like Lance is like a Cam Newton style runner, and Fields is like an electric open field style runner. But
I was more going like broadly speaking, like is Justin Fields currently backing up Brock Purdy, and is Trey Lance starting week 1 and getting drafted in round 4?
Oh,
I honestly think he might
because
be.
I actually, and Lance, I mean, we've barely seen him play, but he didn't eat sacks like Fields has eaten sacks, like nothing like that.
Right. I think the eating sacks thing, I think Shanahan would not put up with that. He would hate that.
No, Fields eats sacks like they're part of a nutritious breakfast. It's ridiculous.
He would take one 11-yard loss on 2nd and 7 instead of dumping it off to Brandon Ayuk, and Shanahan would just be like, he'd pull the plug. He'd send Sam Darnold in so fast.
Yeah, I ranked Fields, like all of our Fields ranks are not that out of line with the market. Like what's his ADP? It's probably like, I think
Well, that's
like
what I
10
was
right
gonna
now.
say. Like
Yeah.
because we agree with each other. I have him 12, you have him 12. Davis has him 14th.
And his ADP is 10.
His ADP is 10. So we're all
we're-
slightly behind ADP, but not in a big way. None of us are taking a huge.
But I
stand
don't think
against him.
any of us would take him. I think
I
Gunn
traded for him. I just traded for him. So let me pull that up.
See, I wouldn't do that.
You did, but you were getting out of Trey Lance. You were treating Trey Lance as an asset that had value.
Yeah, I mean, I would trade for Fields if it got me into the elite quarterback club, right? Like if I'm just driving down Plebeian Alley and I like see the elite quarterback club, there's like lights, people dancing.
We think Justin
Pat's
Fields
there with
is
his $3 million. He's buying everybody shots, and I'm like out here like riding my Trey Lance unicycle. And someone says like, "Hey, you want to come inside? Like, it only costs a couple extra first-round picks." Like, yeah, I'm throwing my bike on the sidewalk and I'm getting into the club. But then as soon as I'm into the club, I'm like moving up around. I'm like, "Hey, how's your Trevor Lawrence looking?
I mean,
how's that Lamar Jackson doing?" Like, I'm trying to change.
Isn't Kyler Murray currently the cheapest ticket into the elite quarterback club?
Yes.
Well, he's cheaper than Fields.
Have you seen my lovely ranking on Kyler Murray?
Yeah,
I preached the good word. Yeah, I think Fields, like, I put him at 12 because I respect that he is a quarterback who's going to score a lot of points. And I'm not like that certain that he's bad. Like I still think it's totally possible that the prospect profile comes to fruition this year. And I think like if I was taking a loudly and confidently anti-Field stance, I think I'm opening myself up to seem like a total idiot in a year. But yeah, I just don't see a reason to take that risk. Like he's not priced in a way that makes sense when you consider that he has so much risk. Like it's just not that much more expensive to just go get Lamar Jackson or Trevor Lawrence. Like so when the Lamar Jackson contract stuff was happening, Fields was going ahead of him. That was insane.
That's a great point. So this trade, I did this in May. So just after the draft, I gave up Trey Lance, the 211 this year, a 2024 first, a 2025 first, and a 2024 second. And I got back Justin Fields and DeAndre Swift.
Done deal. Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
now you'd be taking that and trying to go get Lamar, Lawrence, Burrow. That's what you would do?
Yeah. I mean, probably not like, yeah, I'm not even a big fan of like Lawrence's price. I like it more than Fields' price. Yeah, I would try to get Watson plus. I like that. I think Watson, I have Watson ranked ahead of Justin Fields.
But yeah, but this is for everyone, not just me. So go ahead.
Yeah, I would try to do Watson plus. Depending on your team situation, I'd be interested in doing the Kyler plus route, but I know that's more team dependent. But yeah, I'd be looking at one of the other guys for sure. Like I'd be fine to stop it at Jackson. I'd be looking, I mean, I'd always be curious how much I have to add to go get Jalen Hurts or Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes. Like I'd just try to keep adding if I could.
Yeah. Do you want to talk Kyler? Because this is probably their first big disagreement with these elite quarterbacks.
We talked Kyler a bit.
I changed my ranking, so he disappeared.
First one, right?
Yeah. We've talked him a bunch. We also, just as a reminder here, when we get to tight end, my Mark Andrews ranking is not real. He's going way up. I'm not this far off the market from him in our sheet. I need to change these. So I got Kyler 29th. Corain, you have him 23. Jakob, you have him 13. My deal would be is Kyler is very specific in the context of your team. If you got a shitty team or a middling team and you want to add a good quarterback, I think he's like a good asset to add. But if you got a good team, Kyler's doing nothing for you. If you're one of the three best teams in your self-contained league, Kyler is Davis Mills to you. He's adding nothing.
Yeah, I mean, my take on Kyler Murray would just be that whatever the cost is of insulating Kyler Murray for this year, and then you get Kyler Murray either late this year or start of next year, that cost is just not nearly as large as the discrepancy in value between him and the rest of the quarterbacks that score like he does. So sure. I think Kyler Murray is just like a pretty strong value, almost regardless of build. I did not have a lot of Kyler Murray at the time of his injury. he's always been kind of similar to Lamar Jackson. And I mean, beyond the case that I made earlier, I'll just admit my bias. Like, Jack's just one of my favorite players, and I've always just preferred Lamar Jackson. I just think he's a better player than Kyler Murray. That being said, ever since he's got injured, I've just been buying the shit out of him, and pretty equally distributed between every team that I'm tanking. I want Kyler Murray on. I think he's like the 101 of assets you want if you're tanking. And then even teams I'm not tanking, like, this is my chance to get an elite quarterback cheap, the way I see it. And then you just got to find 2 other quarterbacks. So if I can get like Kyler Murray and Aaron Rodgers, or Kyler Murray and Matthew Stafford, or Kyler Murray and Geno Smith for considerably cheaper than I can just get Trevor Lawrence or Justin Herbert or Lamar Jackson, like, that's a pretty appealing option to me if those guys aren't available, or if the cost would be a lot higher. I've traded for Kyler Murray a lot. I've traded, one deal was I did CJ Stroud, Trey Lance.
Well, immediate win. You win.
And the 110 for Kyler, McLaurin, and
my
Pacheco.
God. This poor person you just traded with.
No, I think that's more fair than you think. Stroud goes ahead of Kyler. Stroud and Kyler are like equal value. I don't think they should be, but they are in the market.
They shouldn't be. And Trey Lance at this point,
really?
he's like, Trey Lance is like a veteran power forward who's getting paid $27 million against the salary cap. Like, you got to attach a pick to get him off your roster just for the psychic damage involved. I mean, Trey Lance, we're entering into a territory, honestly, where I think Trey Lance may never start another NFL game. I think we are closer to Trey Lance playing in a spring football league than we are seeing him start at quarterback for the 49ers.
Well, if he ever becomes a Winnipeg Blue Bomber, I'm going to re-up my season tickets. That's for sure. But I mean, I can't believe you just called him Marcus Morris. That's just hateful.
No, he's more. I mean, he's like what Kristaps Porzingis is going to be to Celtics fans in about 18 months.
Hey. Me and Sam will be giving our Kristaps takes on ADP chasing next week. Well, here's the other trade. Here's a trade I've done twice. One was on a tanking team. I did Trevor Lawrence for Kyler, a 2025 first, and Deontay Johnson. And then one on a not tanking team where I also had Aaron Rodgers and Geno Smith. I did Kyler for Trevor Lawrence and a 2024 first. Or sorry, the other way around.
Wait, on the tanking team you did you got Deontay in a tanking team? Yes.
So tanking one, I did Trevor out, Kyler in, and then also a 25-1 and Deontay.
Got it.
I'd happily reflip Deontay, but nobody wants him. So hopefully he'll score points this year. He will not stop me from getting the 101 on this team. I don't roster any players. And then the other one was not a tanking team, but it was basically the same deal. I just didn't get the Deontay throw in, but it was Trevor for Kyler and a 24 first. But I already had Aaron Rodgers and Geno Smith and Desmond Ridder. So I'm not like hard up at quarterback this year. I can get through the year at quarterback. So it's more a value play for me, where I prefer Kyler in the 24 first in that scenario. I've done several other Kyler trades. I can't remember them all, but that's generally been like, if I have Lawrence or Herbert, I'm trying to see if I can get Kyler in a considerable plus. And then if I don't have any of the elite quarterbacks, I'm trying to get into Kyler. Like, I've been trying to do, I don't think I've been successful, but I've been trying to do like some T. Higgins for Kyler Murray type of trades.
I like that.
So anyway, we've been trying to buy a lot. Every time that I have Bryce Young or CJ Stroud, or a pick that should be Bryce Young or CJ Stroud, I'm trying to trade that for Kyler Murray.
Pretty good, I think.
Yeah, so he's more attainable than I was realizing. Because I mean, I have him behind like Olave and Waddle, but you obviously have him ahead of those guys.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah,
but that's a lot of it. Like, I value, we look at the sheet, right? We go down these quarterbacks and tight ends. I'm probably the highest on like a majority of the players we discussed today, because I'm just higher on the quarterback and tight end positions generally than I am the wide receiver and running back positions versus the market.
So like, I think we talked enough about Stroud and Young in the rookie podcast.
Yeah.
I don't have any, and Richardson too, actually. Like, so if you guys missed any of that, go back and listen to the rookie podcast. Tua, one of the most interesting guys on the board, because he's locked into this offense where he's going to score a ton of fantasy points when he's healthy. He's like a little bit mobile. But like, I mean, he could like actually be retired soon, right? I mean, this dude takes another concussion. It's like curtains for him. I don't think he's coming back.
There's no non-concussion reason why he's valued below Stroud and Young, right? Like he
Correct.
was as good of a
No.
prospect as Stroud and Young, but instead of throwing to DJ Chark, Terrace Marshall, Pat Crane's favorite player in the NFL, Robert Woods, Nico Collins.
Have you
like he's throwing
publicly
to good wide
apologized
receivers.
for that thread yet?
No, in fact,
You can do it now if you like.
someone.
An opportunity.
Oh, Sean Siegel on Stealing Bananas
Oh, no.
kind of hinted that he's kind of open to.
Oh, Sean.
And then Sam started
What is
doing it too.
happening?
Sam like did one about I don't remember,
God.
maybe Odell.
It was Odell, but he actually has a point there. I'm with Sam on Odell. I actually moved Odell.
Pat had a point too, but it's just uncouth to say it in
No.
public.
Yeah,
You
you're
do
just not
that-
supposed
I
to say
actually-
the point.
I did my projections on the Texans, and Robert Woods came out the second highest of the wide receivers, and then I just manually flipped half a touchdown to Mechie because I didn't want it to be the case anymore.
Yeah, see, everyone's in denial. Everyone's got their head in the sand on Robert Woods,
Yeah.
and I'm not saying he's good or anything, but he's just like he's free in best ball. Okay, this isn't a best ball pod, but you're allowed to point out guys that are free in best ball.
Point being
Oh,
that
everyone.
Tua throws to good wide receivers, and is proven to be a good NFL quarterback. Stroud and Young throw to terrible NFL wide receivers, and have not yet proven that. So it's got to just be the concussions, which I guess we talked about. We talked about this with Tyjae Spears about the fantasy community's willingness to forget and remember injuries at convenient times. Like if it's week
almost like it's more than a willingness. It's almost like it's very predictable, and it's almost like not something that people can emotionally keep track of. Like it's like you can remind someone of the injury later, and they just won't care because the guy's been productive. You know what I mean? It's not like people actually forget. It's just like the emotionality of this game. Like if Tua stays healthy this year, people will not care entering 2024 that he had a few concussions in 2022. They just won't.
So then the move now is trade for Tua, and then if like in week 3 the Dolphins are just the Dolphins, then you just trade him.
That is the move. That is
Which
exactly.
sucks. I'm not
what
really a
people should
Tua
do.
believer. Like I don't know. I've been in conflict because I would prefer to be out on Tua. Like I'm not a big fan of this archetype of quarterback. Like, I don't really want to be in on the young, not truly elite pocket passers, but he's just priced extraordinarily fairly.
Yeah.
What about?
I mean, it feels
Go
like a bad bet to make as a buy though. You know what I mean? Like even if that was your plan, like, oh, sick, I'm gonna make this, I'm gonna make it all back in one trade. I'm gonna trade a fair market value for Tua. He's gonna blow up with Tyreek and Waddle. It's gonna be awesome. Because this is real basic gambling stuff. Like when the risk of ruin is real, when there's a risk of the asset going to actual zero and you can calculate that risk, it's a bad, like your willingness to do that trade should be minimal.
Yeah. And I'm generally against market timing too, which is why I struggle to make that case, but it does just feel like he's mispriced, I guess. Like, I don't think that he's an asset. It's almost like how I feel about Josh Jacobs in seasonal, where it's like, I don't want to bet on this type of asset, but I also don't think that he's priced correctly based on how people would normally value this type of asset.
Right. Yeah, I agree. And I think like the issue is it is concussions, which I think makes it more difficult. Like if it was more, if it was like some sort of, Dak ankle injury recovery type situation, I would be less concerned about it going really wrong on you. But this feels like you can lose a ton of value. He's still expensive enough where you can lose an absolute borderline crippling amount of value on this guy. So that definitely makes it concerning. But that's why you could pull off this flip. And I think people will. It might take 6 weeks instead of 3, but I think you'll have a sell window if you were to trade for him now. And I also feel like hasn't he been a big riser recently in best ball? We didn't actually on ADP Chasing talk much ADP today, but yeah, he's been a big riser, I think. And that will probably continue to be the case because again, it's sort of this amnesia, this collective amnesia sets in pretty quickly. Like it's like he's healthy in training camp. Like, of course he's healthy in training camp. He's wearing a red jersey.
Do you guys think Tua is actually good?
Yes.
Yeah, I actually do. Yeah, I feel pretty strongly that like at least he's like hyper accurate, and that's like the hardest thing to teach a quarterback. Obviously, I don't think he'll ever be a good deep thrower. Like there was a couple throws where he looked like a little kid trying to like throw a basketball up into a hoop or whatever, like cocking all the way back, launching his whole body into the air or whatever. Like he'll never develop that, but he is extremely accurate.
Game manager was the
question
kind
to
of
me.
the derogative term, right? We used to say game manager is kind of like a derogatory term in a sense, but like I think the modern NFL with how much passing you can do and how sharp some of these systems are, it's like you kind of are just like an executor, you know? And I think like like Brady was basically an executor of maybe not a system exactly, but like he was getting the ball out to the right spots at a very, very high rate. And, it's the best ever. So I think I view Tua as kind of like a better version of Jimmy Garoppolo or something. Like he executes. I trust him a lot more than I trust Garoppolo, but it's kind of happening in a similar way.
Because I think that's the question, is like we have seen in the NFL several times where coach comes in, they have good skill players, they have a really progressive scheme that isn't really like a lot of things that have been happening before. And this offense goes on a tear with a pretty replaceable starting quarterback, and it doesn't sustain. Like we saw the Foles, Chip Kelly Eagles, we saw the original Goff McVay Rams. Like we've seen it with Jimmy Garoppolo, who kind of has sustained it when he's got hurt with the San Francisco 49ers. That's I think my question with Tua is, it's like, is he like, I know he's not Mahomes good, but is he like a higher tier where he's like closer to like the Herbert and the Burrow or whatever, where he can actually do this? Or is this like a fairly fragile McDaniels puppet? Maybe like a Dak's a good example. Like, is Tua Dak good? Or is he like Goff good? Because I guess that's like, to me, it's like,
I think he's more Dak good than Goff good.
Okay.
Yeah, I think Goff has serious weaknesses that you have to scheme around, and he will cap out even in that perfect environment. And I think Tua also has weaknesses, but they're not as bad as Goff's weaknesses.
Way better under pressure than Goff for sure.
Yeah. And Goff he just leans on that underneath stuff, and he can actually, like, the weird thing is Goff could be more of a complete passer than Tua, but I feel like Tua with his ugly duck deep ball is still more complete.
Goff has the tools. Goff has the tools. He doesn't have the know-how.
He's not sure where the sun rises.
Yeah, it's not in his brain.
Yeah.
Goff has one of the most like dumb looks that I've ever seen from a professional athlete. Like anytime that I looked, exactly, Pat's doing the wind horse. And like that's how Goff looks at all times. Like I remember it was the season after Jared Goff
doing the wind horse is what
season.
He has a dumb look on his face all the time.
It was just like, I don't know. Like I remember just seeing, I think it was like a Pittsburgh game. It was like the season after the Rams were unstoppable. And then it was like the next year. I remember they're playing at Pittsburgh and Goff was just getting sacked a bunch. And I was like, at the time I was actively talking to someone about whether I would buy low on Goff in a dynasty league. And I like looked at him come up from the sack and I just like looked into his eyes and I was like, no, like this dude is just not it. Like he doesn't have it.
Yeah. Well, with Tua, I kind of want to push back a little bit on the idea that this system sort of, like, yes, it could be kind of a Nick Foles in the Chip Kelly system level, kind of like, wow, that was fun, and then it went away type of thing. And we saw signs of that. We just talked about the Sun ADP chasing, where teams were taking away some of those middle of the field throws, and that was like kind of limiting what the Dolphins can do. And do they have a counterpunch for that? But like McDaniel is a Shanahan guy. He's been helping him run that system for years now. And like that system has sustained success. The fact that Brock Purdy came in and immediately performed just like Jimmy Garoppolo is yet another sign to me that like Tua can do just fine. He wasn't on that team and McDaniel wasn't there last year, but this is that system. And I think McDaniel is extremely sharp, just like Shanahan, in terms of how he's designing this offense. So I have a lot of faith in this larger system continuing to produce highly efficient offense. And I actually have a little bit more faith that McDaniel will lean into the pass more than Shanahan. I mean, one of his weaknesses, I think, is that he really just does not want to move away from the run heavy stuff. And I think McDaniel showed a little bit more willingness to do that, especially before they got Jeff Wilson, and the running game was struggling a little bit, and he didn't force that. He traded for a running back, but he didn't force it. I think he might be a little bit more like philosophically flexible on that.
Yeah, and I mean, it's probably a good sign that they maybe they will still sign Dalvin Cook, but it's probably a good sign that they weren't like, here's $8 million. Like that shows that they're like, they're considerate. It's like, okay, if Dalvin will sign with us for $3 million, sure, why not? Add another body. But they're not like going out of their way to be like, we need to address the running back position.
What about contract risk with Tua? I would say that's probably the big concern. They pick up a fifth-year option, but then
they're like, actually, we don't want to pay a guy whose brain could go kaput because this is a modern day gladiatorial sport, and we don't want to pay you the guaranteed money.
And in a system where the literal, last pick of the draft can come in and have a lot of success. So, what if Sam Darnold shows well in 3 starts?
Well, wait, what is this? Is this when we start to do the Mike White? Why did they go out and sign Mike White for a 2-year deal? The Windhorse point.
Yeah. I mean, but
that's
also
the thing, right?
If
we like
anyone
Tua way
can
less if he's not with McDaniel, Hill, and Waddle.
Exactly. And if anyone can come in and run the system that has certain executing level traits, could they bring in someone for a lot less money? And it's also an interesting thing where we saw, I think we may be starting to see that kind of non-elite tier of quarterbacks, their prices start to drop on the open market, and teams don't want to be in that business. And that could create some downward pressure on, what those types of guys can get as they become available if you're not elite, and making it easier to replace a Tua, and then also more risky to pay a Tua because, you can go out and get someone slightly worse than him for almost nothing.
I mean, can they really pay Tua, Hill, Waddle? Like, I know we've been having that conversation with the Bengals, but Burrow's a lot better than Tua.
They'll be able to get off paying Tua way less than Burrow's contract, way less. And Waddle will not command as much as T, I bet, as well.
Really? I think Waddle will probably command more.
I think he might command more too.
All right.
That's speed. Teams want that speed.
Teams do want that speed. I mean, didn't Tyreek say he's just gonna retire?
He's got 3 years, I think he said.
Didn't he say he was gonna get 2,000 yards this year and then just retire?
Yeah, but then he committed some more crimes, and legal lawyers cost a lot of money. He might need a 4th year.
Yeah, he might need the money.
Yeah, that's
Open
true.
your third eye, Davis.
You're right.
Well,
okay.
I wanted to talk Daniel Jones, and he seems like a guy that could be the template for what Tua gets in terms of money. Like I think he's more in that Daniel Jones level.
I think Tua is just better than Daniel Jones.
I think he's better than Daniel Jones, but don't you think he's in that kind of tier of this is how much we're willing to pay you, especially given the system and that they might be able to, or do you think he's going to command more, like significantly more than that?
Man, it depends what happens this season, I guess, right? If he plays 17 healthy games and he plays at the level that he played last year, he's commanding a lot more money than Daniel Jones, I think. Because someone would give it to him.
Yeah, that's probably true. I mean, Jones got 4 years. I'm trying to pull up the exact. He got paid decently well, and that's one reason I want to talk about him is that I'm significantly higher on him than you guys. I have him at 40.
Yeah.
Davis has him at 53. You have him at 57, Jacob.
I'm just not interested.
Okay,
yeah, that's kind of how I feel.
He scored just like Tua last year.
Yeah.
He cannot be cut next year. He's got $63 million dead cap number next year, $45 million cap hit. So he's on the roster. He, is now entering his second season with Dayball. They're going to pass. He's mobile. He's young to the point where you're not worried about him falling off. And if you want to trade him mid-season or whatever, you're gonna the person trading for him knows that they have a starting quarterback for sure in 2024, given the contract that he just got. So he feels like one of those guys where it's not sexy, but he's protected. He's not as risky as Tua.
I would say
I
would be more likely to take Daniel Jones in a startup than Tua, but not really interested in trading for either one of them, I guess.
Pat, do you know where you lost this Daniel Jones argument? It was when the second thing that you said was he can't be cut next year. When your selling point for a quarterback is talking about why their contract doesn't allow them to be released from the terms of their employment, I'm not sold. That's not how I want it to be led.
If they're not elite, that's like one of the main things I look at is because if they're not elite, then all the talent-based argument stuff at that point is like, because these NFL teams are looking for elite play at the quarterback position.
Yeah.
So if you're not elite at the quarterback position, you're fundamentally at risk of losing your job. It's really that simple. Sure. And so then the very next thing, okay, so you're not elite. So I don't really care like who's better between, Daniel Jones or Derek Carr. It's like, I don't give a shit who's better. I care about who's got the better contract, who's going to definitely be a starter for me next year. Now that I've got that taken care of, I want to look at, okay, who's going to score more fantasy points? Like, what am I actually getting out of these guys? If I get a better contract, but I have very little interest in what they're actually going to do as a fantasy player, then I'll take on more risk to make sure I'm getting fantasy points out of it. But that's probably like the second thing I'm looking at after are you elite or not.
My only pushback on that is that you really are paying for it. Like I agree with you that Daniel Jones like is kind of in the same sphere of these other guys in terms of these mid-level starting quarterbacks who are generally at risk. But like whether it's the contract or whether it's the youth or whether it's the good vibes, like or a combination thereof, you're really paying a premium on Jones versus the rest of these mid-levels. Like he's going in the 4th round of startups where, he's going right around guys like Josh Jacobs. He's going ahead of Devontae Adams. Like there's guys that could score a lot of fantasy points this year. Tony Pollard that we talked about on our previous show, Ramondre Stevenson, and you look at how we're drafting guys in best ball, like he's basically going back to back with Geno Smith, who had a better year last year than Daniel Jones has ever had in his career as a real life NFL quarterback. And I get that Geno's older. I get that his contract isn't as secure, but like, I don't know. I just would way rather like invest in Geno at that lower opportunity cost than in Daniel Jones at that higher opportunity cost, when I think the bet is like mostly the same for this year. And the youth appeal is like really theoretical because I don't have any level of safety that Daniel Jones is starting NFL games at 32. Like, I don't know, maybe
the youth appeal is
payoff,
just,
but I have no idea if it's true.
The youth appeal is just so that next year he doesn't look like a 1 year and then he's definitely done. Yes. The youth appeal is so that you can get out of him next year and people view him as a solid long-term starter, when next year he is in fact not a solid long-term starter, because unless he absolutely crushes this year, he's going to be entering the last year of his contract where they can't move off of him. And so to me, I'm like, if I can get like, okay, Geno Smith and Daniel Jones are going the same level in best ball drafts, but one of them offers me the ability to get out at a pretty similar price to what I'm paying now. And the other one probably loses a ton of value in Geno Smith. So I'm like, I feel like I'm getting free points. Like I
feel like you can get Geno for like nothing though.
I think you kind of hit, like, I can see the argument for both sides, right? Like you're making a case. I think it's a good case that I probably don't give enough weight to, because I just get the ick with Daniel Jones. But like, yeah, you're making the case where it's like, you can get Daniel Jones, you can rent his production for the year, and you can probably get out for close to the same value. And then my counter to that would be like, yeah, but you're paying so little for Geno Smith that if he just dies on your roster, it's fine because you're getting more than what you paid for in points. And I don't know. I think that both of those sides of the coin are probably.
The funny thing is that Daniel Jones was the Geno Smith last year, and I think the upside.
I was all in on Daniel Jones last year.
Well, we're hitting a good point, which is that the macro point here is just winning a quarterback trade that seems really uninteresting at the time, just like pays dividends for so long. Like if you would have sent 3rd round picks for Geno last year, you're Scrooge McDucking in Sklansky bucks. Like it was such a win.
Geno Smith off of waivers like has changed 2 teams that would be tanking right now, but are instead competing because we got Geno off waivers. Like it's like life changing.
That's such a great point. Yeah, I'm with you that I want to be overweight the elites. I also am I'm more comfortable than you guys, I think, playing the game where, I'm using that contract for protection. Like, I don't know where Jordan Love is, but I probably have him higher than you guys. Oh, actually, Davis has him at 71. I have him at 85, and Jacob has him at 100. That's another one where I'm like, he's kind of set up for 2 years. I can kind of see what he is, get more information, and I don't have to pay for it.
I really like Jordan Love because I think he's just absolutely giga locked in to starting in for the next 2 years and might be good, right? But might not be good. Might be
in for the
horrible.
next 2 years.
He's locked in.
What if
he's locked in as the
horrendous?
week 1 starter next year, I think. Unless he's
I
horrendous.
don't think he's locked in at all. And I think he's probably horrendous.
Well, shit. Maybe
He's probably
he is.
not
I don't
good.
know.
He's probably not good.
Like, I mean, I don't, when I say he's probably horrendous, I don't want to be like, dismissive of things that we don't know. Cause as a wise man would say, we just don't know. But I wouldn't say that there's like, of the evidence that we have on Jordan Love, does any of it support him being good?
No. And I think maybe it was Gretsch saying, someone was talking about how run heavy he thinks they're going to be. And it kind of clicked for me that they're going to be super run heavy. And so that could also be a concern for Love. But just that archetype of player is one that I generally am willing to kind of wade in because I feel like I can be wrong and not have it be catastrophic because of the contract. Whereas like I'm the lowest on Kirk Cousins of you guys. You have him, Jacob, at
Probably
83. Davis is at 64. I'm at 93. So that's a pretty big disagreement. And that's the type of dude I'm like, okay, he's about to turn 35. He could be productive this year, but like he's going to go to zero. He's got no contract past this year. Like he's very, very likely going to zero. Why wouldn't I pay that little extra premium, or I mean, I'm not really willing to take him where he's going, but like, I don't know. I'd just so much rather try to move into the Daniel Jones tier than be stuck with a guy like Cousins who's going to expire.
Yeah, I think that's probably slightly the difference is like I'm pretty comfortable with the guys going to zero. Like I would just say I'm generally a pessimist period on most of these players. Like you just look on aggregate, if you're not a rookie and you're not a draft pick, the majority of the rest of the players are all losing value year over year, every single year in Dynasty. And so I just try to like operate from the standpoint of I think that this player might die on my roster as much as possible, even for younger players. And so I usually want to be overweight on draft picks. I want to be trying to push up into the elites. But if not, like I'm tending to go for the guys that I just think are going to score the most points. And maybe it depends on format. Like this is one for sure, where if it is like a 4-point touchdown league with pretty standard scoring settings, like I might be more into the Jordan Loves that you're mentioning in the sense that like it's probably the most important thing from your quarterback slot is that you have 2 of them that start every week.
Right.
Whereas like I play like most of my leagues are like 6-point passing touchdowns. A lot of them is like you get, these like weird things for like points per completion and stuff like where you get a wider spread where like the value of a replacement edge that Kirk Cousins is giving you over a Kenny Pickett is just like pretty substantial to the point where I don't really mind if it dies because like Cousins is just providing me a lot of win equity this year where I'm more okay with Cousins. Like, and in general, I'm just not really playing the middle. Like if I look at my top owned Dynasty quarterbacks right now, it's actually a 2-way tie at the top. It's 27% each on Deshaun Watson, Lamar Jackson, and then 20% each Geno Smith and Kyler Murray, 15% Josh Allen, and then we're into like Derek Carr, and then it's like Desmond Ridder, Sam Darnold, Ryan Tannehill, Brock Purdy, Aaron Rodgers. Like it's immediately like I don't really have much of the Tua Stroud.
You joked with Sam Darnold, but I mean that's the clear Geno.
He's the Geno,
year, right?
What if Purdy is actually such a sick buy and you trade like future seconds for
awesome
Purdy
buy, dude.
and Purdy just becomes Jimmy Garoppolo for the next 10 years?
I think Purdy is an incredible buy. I haven't updated these rankings in like a month, so I'm sure that wherever I put him is not where I would put him today.
Yeah. I don't know where I put Purdy. I had him at 98.
Incredible. We have him all within 2 picks. We had him 98, 99, and 100. But I promise you,
I'm the highest.
That's too low.
I'm the Purdy bull. Yeah, it is probably too low though.
We should talk tight ends. I would
rather have Brock Purdy than Kenny Pickett for sure right now.
All right, once Kenny Pickett's name gets invoked, we gotta get
I have very little pushback on that, and to the point where I think I'm just going to make that switch. What about Love? You'd rather have him than Jordan Love? I think I would.
Yeah, I've seen Brock Purdy be good in the NFL.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, I'm doing it.
Yeah.
I
I'm just
already
gonna
had him
move
ranked
him out
above
of those
Jordan
guys.
Love previously. But I think I would take Purdy over Kirk Cousins and Derek Carr and those guys. So I think Purdy's
Yeah.
going to score points. That's
Right,
the
me
other
too.
thing. Like Purdy's young. I've seen him play well, and he's going to score fantasy points. So like, I'm actually quite interested in Brock Purdy. Like the only issue was when we did these ranks like a month and a half ago. Like I wasn't 100% sure that he was going to start at all, and I was pretty sure he wasn't going to start week 1, which of course matters in Superflex. And now I'm pretty sure he's starting 17 games.
Purdy versus Russ Wilson, Jared Goff, and Geno Smith, which is a tier in my ranks.
I'm definitely taking Purdy over Goff because I don't like Jared Goff. I think I'm taking Purdy over all of those guys. Maybe not Geno. I'm pretty into Geno, but as you can tell by him being my third most rostered quarterback, but that would be the closest conversation. But I think I'm taking Purdy over all of them.
I just moved him ahead of all of them.
Well, all right, guys, we are what, like an hour into this? I don't even know. We're a long time into this. We have not mentioned a tight end's name.
That's true.
So let's do tight end. I think will be.
Can we do some
Clayton
rapid
on.
fire stuff on quarterback before we move
Yeah,
on?
sure. Why don't we do this? Why don't we do
Okay.
one?
What would you give for Trey Lance right now?
2023 third, 2025 third. I mean,
You know what a difference this makes is that when we did these rankings 6 weeks ago, Trey Lance was ranked ahead of Brock Purdy in our consensus ranks, and I promise you that's not the case today.
yeah.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'll be making an adjustment.
But Lance, so I mean, candidates for guys to be Tannehill, Geno Smith, because we've kind of hinted at it, but that really is one of the ways that you can gain significant value. I think the other way, we already talked a bunch of the rookies. The other way is to go get that rookie that everyone hates, go get a Will Levis for nothing. He probably will start games. If he's a kind of a terrible candidate, I think, because he's bad. But, there's like Daniel Jones was this guy where Justin Herbert was this guy where people were like, he's not worthy of where he was drafted by the NFL, so we're going to ignore him. That's a way to gain value. But the other big way right now is to find these veterans who float around. Marcus Mariota didn't really become it, but you would have had a sell window there, I think. So,
yeah.
Or who else besides, I guess, Darnold, Lance? It's funny the 49ers have two of them. Or is there anyone else that could be like the Geno Smith, Ryan Tannehill, come from the rise from the grave type dude?
I mean, I'll still never give up on Jameis Winston entirely, but that ship has probably sailed.
That's a good
one. Is he back on the Saints?
Yeah, he is still on the Saints.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a guy where you could certainly see a team trading for him in week 6. Like what if Tua has like another concussion and it's like curtains for Tua Tagovailoa for the 2024 season? Like they've got to try somebody, right? They've spent like all their money for this year. Like, are they going to pin their hopes to Mike White? Like, I don't know. To me, like Jameis, the first guy I would call. I just still think he can play. Like, I get that coaches are risk averse and they don't like the interceptions, but like, I don't know. I just can't be convinced that he's not one of the best 32 quarterbacks in the NFL.
I could see him having a later stage Ryan Fitzpatrick career where he plays for different. Man. He plays until he's like 39, which is like so perfect because of the symmetry of them playing together in Tampa Bay, where he just is on a stint of 1-year deals until like 2029 and like intersperses seasons being a backup with being like QB9, but like is QB 23 and QBR or whatever every single year.
Yeah, he turns 30 in January, so he's still pretty young. Like he's got a long career. He's got 5 or 6 years of being a backup at the very least. How did Sam Darnold get so many more chances than Jameis Winston? Like Jameis Winston was so clearly better than Sam Darnold. I don't know. I don't get it. Do we have any hope for Baker left? Well, I was sitting here waiting for Davis to talk about Baker Mayfield. This was your prompt, Davis.
Yeah. I mean, look, Baker is the best Geno bet this year. Like guy that everyone is completely left for dead. Everyone think like no one wants to say this publicly. This is like doing a Robert Woods tweet thread, but the Buccaneers are clearly.
It wasn't a thread. Just a single tweet.
Just a single tweet. I mean, they're clearly the answer to who could be this year's Seahawks, like a team that everyone is left for dead, worst team in the NFL, gonna tank. They're gonna trade Mike Evans, like just like they were gonna trade Tyler Lockett or DK Metcalf or whatever. And then they're plucky. They win a couple games they weren't supposed to. They're playing free and easy. They are now divorced of the ego of their prima donna quarterback, and they're just having fun playing ball. I don't think it's very likely, but I can tell that to myself.
I'll give you.
Isn't Baker kind of a prima donna too?
It depends on who you ask.
Yeah, kind of. I'll give you one guy. There's a quarterback who probably, I would say, 50% chance to start NFL games this year, who had 128 rushing attempts last year. And his name is Clayton Tune. And you can probably get him for absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Clayton Tune is probably going to be the week 1 starter for the Arizona Cardinals, but no one wants to acknowledge that.
They really don't, because it doesn't Colt McCoy have an injury?
He's been practicing though.
He's Colt McCoy.
They released a video of him throwing a deep ball on their Twitter account. It was like Colt, and then they had like the arrow to like, I don't know, whatever, like Davis size wide receiver caught the pass. I'm not sure, but it was, I think Colt will start week 1 just because I don't know, but I feel like we're going to see all 3 Arizona quarterbacks start at some point this year. Unless Tune is good. Maybe they'll just get tuned up.
What about Jacoby Brissett?
That you would bring up Jacoby Brissett since you hate our Lord and Savior Sam Howell.
How are you guys? Maybe that's a better question. Like, how are you handling Howell, Ritter? Those kind of, both guys are true breakout bets, but also have very low floor.
Yeah, I'm in for like leagues where I have them. I feel good about it, but I'm not being like, you know what I'm going to trade a bunch of future seconds for fucking Sam Howell. Like, not doing that.
Yeah, that's the issue is like, I've been trying to trade for Howell
and Ritter, but the problem is like everyone that has Howell and Ritter at this point is like, look, if you give me a first, then sure, but right. I'm not trading Sam Howell for a 2nd round pick on Darnell Mooney. What's the point? And I'm never willing to like actually put my money where my mouth is and go get them. I took a lot of Ritter in rookie drafts, so I've mostly just decided to not sell. That's been like my stand, I guess. I guess I should have taken more Howell. I kind of dismissed him after he went to round 5. So I've like picked him up a little bit. I've like traded for him a couple times, but I mean, I'm pretty interested though. Like, both of them had a higher peak season rushing yards in college than Anthony Richardson, lest we forget. And they're going to start probably week 1, and they both have good weapons. So, like, the only issue is you need a 3rd quarterback, because, like, if you're trying to contend this year, like, and your QB2 is Desmond Ritter, and you don't have a 3rd option, like, I would just not feel very comfortable with that scenario.
For sure. Yeah, this will surprise people. I'm the highest on Howell of the 3 of us in our ranks. I'm at 112, Jacob at 115, Davis at 142. I'm also the 2nd highest on Ritter, 117, Jacob's at 114, Davis at 131. I like my thing with Howell and best ball is like, and Ritter to an extent, although I started to warm more to Ritter, but it's like, what's the payoff? Like, what am I actually getting? You know, if I'm even right, there's no question about what the payoff is here in Dynasty. If you're right on Sam Howell or Desmond Ritter in a Superflex Dynasty, one, you just need to fill the position. So even having, like, at these prices, just getting a starter for just this year is pretty valuable. And then if you were to get multiple seasons for these prices, I think both are pretty awesome. So yeah, format makes a big difference when you're thinking through this stuff.
Yeah, I'm probably going to move them
true.
up even. Like, I would say that at the time we did this, I was probably baking in a little bit more risk of Brissett or Heineke starting week 1 than I would say that there is currently. So I would probably move them up. Like, I actually just traded for Sam Howell the other day. I traded. I was on the clock at the 109 in a league where my team was pretty loaded and I just wasn't really sure what Zay Flowers was going to accomplish. And I traded the 109 and the 201 for a 24 first that I would say is more likely to be early than late, and Mr. Sam Howell.
Sorry, say that again. You got
So I was on I had 109 and 201. I was on the clock.
okay.
Zay Flowers best available. I traded the 109 and the 201 for Sam Howell and what I would say is probably an early to mid 24 first.
Yeah. That's amazing. What does that even value Howell at? Because you essentially moved
basically the way I looked
first.
at it was like I would rather have the 24 first than the 109. My guess is the guy making the trade was like, I'll send the future first and I'll get the now first.
Yeah. Right. But I want the future first anyway. Yeah.
Right. And then I viewed it as like 201, that's Will Levis. And I would just rather have Sam Howell than Will Levis because I think they're both probably low percentage long-term bets, but one of them starting week 1.
Yeah, I actually just moved Levis behind Howell in my rankings. Because I was like that. Well, that's silly. I shouldn't have Howell below him. So,
which is an interesting take.
Like
you could definitely argue that Levis has like the better long-term pass since he has the way better draft capital. But I don't know. To me, it's like once we're in the stage of like really sketchy young quarterbacks, it's like I'll just take the one who's starting the first week of the season.
Yeah, and I mean, Howell's so tough because the draft capital just wasn't there. But his profile, like with the draft capital, would have been much more interesting to me than Levis's.
For sure.
Like with equal draft capital, and then it's like he is getting the start. So I think you could view him as kind of more of like a 3rd round pick now, in the sense of the organizational commitment in the second year for a 5th rounder rarely happens, and it did happen here. So they're more committed to him than his 5th round draft capital suggests that they would be in his second year. But it still makes it difficult because they also can move on from him extremely easily and may do so in season.
I think that's probably true. Are we ready to do tight ends?
Yeah.
Last question, over under 0.5. Rest of career week 1 starts from Zach Wilson.
0. Under.
Week 1 starts for Zach Wilson. I will say 0.
Under. Yeah.
Okay. Because I feel like he's going to start another game at some point, but I feel like that game will be like he was the 3rd string quarterback and it's week 14 and okay, all right, Zach. And then it's like Blaine Gabbert or something.
I think Zach Wilson needs to go like full Geno. Like he needs to go back up someone for like 4 years. And then like
wander
people need to forget. Yeah.
Yeah. That's probably fair.
All right. So tight ends. I mean, honestly, it is such a fast conversation. These are the guys who have been tight end 1s in fantasy who are ranked inside the top 12. We have Pitts. Well, he's never been a tight end 1, actually. Or I guess he was
a tight end 1 as a rookie.
Yeah. Andrews, and then obviously such a weird conundrum at the position where the best player is so close to not being played anymore. I had Kelsey 31, Jakob, you had him 37, Pat, you had him 36. Then we have Kittle, who is older than people realize. I think people sort of think he's not 30, but he is 30. Then we have Goddard. And then to me, this is represented in our rankings, pretty big tier break to Freiermuth. And then we just get into
not in Jacob's rankings.
That's true. I guess I got to do the Freiermuth.
He's got him ahead of Goddard.
It's true. If I was ranking today, I would have him ahead of Kittle, to be honest. I just projected Kittle and I don't know. He projects like shit, to be honest.
All right,
he always projects like shit. That's the whole thing with him. He's good, but he will have massive spike weeks. So
I know.
Just ride it out.
I know. It's like playing the Powerball. It's just, it's gross. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Do you want me to talk about Freiermuth already?
Yes. Yeah. What do we have interesting to say about Kyle Pitts or Travis Kelce that hasn't been said a million times by everyone?
The one thing about Kyle Pitts is that one of his ADPs is egregious. Like he should not be drafted this high in Dynasty if he's actually a round 7 best ball pick. But
his best ball ADP is egregious. His best ball ADP is egregious and part of a larger structural mistake that the market is making this year on elite tight ends.
I fully agree with you. I'm just saying, like, there will be one winner. Like, I don't think that those ADPs make any sense together, but I agree with you that it is the best ball ADP that's wrong. Take on Pat Freiermuth is that he is a young tight end where everybody, like, we always talk about, like, tight ends need time. And he appears to just already be quite good at the game. Just pulling up his stats right here. But he was like, his targets per route run put him in the same tier with most of the elite guys. He actually had, or
what was it? What was
not
his
like the elite
run?
guys? I'm pulling it up. I will have it in literally in just 1 second here. Where's our guy Freiermuth? Sorry, I was not prepped to immediately go to
Pat. You weren't ready to go to our tight end 7 as our starting
Yeah,
point?
come on, man.
There's
I was
nothing.
not ready to immediately go to tight end 7.
There's just not anything
I have to
interesting.
pull up
Like
the
TJ
Here we go.
Hawkinson, sure, whatever. You know
Right.
what you're getting.
Right.
Yes. So Pat Freiermuth last year, 1.68 yards per route run, but in a pretty dysfunctional offense, had 21.3% targets per route run, which is a really strong mark for a tight end. That's not that far off from most of the top guys we're seeing at the position. Like once you get past Kyle Pitts and Mark Andrews. And he did it on I think people think of Pat Freiermuth as like a kind of a Hunter Henry-esque figure, or like shimmies his way down the field 6 yards at a time because he's like white and kind of thick. But his average depth of target was 8.7. That ranked 8th at the position. That's like actually pretty strong. It's not deep.
He's more like Hawkinson, I think.
Exactly. Like I think he literally is TJ Hawkinson. It's just that he hasn't already gotten into, that offensive environment that's really helped him. But he's played 2 years as a 22 and 23-year-old tight end in fairly adverse offensive circumstances with legitimate target competition. And has posted really strong numbers in his first 2 NFL seasons. Like his ADOT was higher than Hawkinson. His target rate was just slightly below. So pretty similar in terms of his weighted target rate with TJ Hawkinson. I just think he's quite undervalued. Like we're talking about a guy who's very, very safe. I think at absolute worst with Pat Freiermuth, you're getting a guy who's going to be between like tight end 5 to tight end 10 for probably the duration of his career. But I'm just not very closed off to his upside. We don't actually really know what his athletic testing is because he didn't test. We don't think it's incredible. And then you add in that he actually does get down the field and earn targets in the intermediate levels. Like I'm not closed off to the possibility that he is able to ascend into being not like a tight end 1 guy, but like a Hawkinson-y tight end 4, tight end 5 type of guy. And he typically costs less than a mid-first round pick. So I think especially in a tight end premium format, like, if this is like your start 10 half PPR league, I'm not ranking Pat Freiermuth this highly, and I would rather just shoot for the moon on a George Kittle. But if I'm doing like a tight end premium super flex dynasty league, start 11, you put Pat Freiermuth into your lineup, or even if you can get him as a tight end 2 behind your elite, he's probably giving you pretty comparable production to any other like wide receiver 2-3 type that you're putting in the flex in a tight end premium scoring system. But you also get that benefit of the long-term tight end option. And yeah, I just think in general, I just think people kind of dismiss his upside because they're icked about the Steelers, and people have kind of decided that Pat Freiermuth doesn't have upside. But I think the fantasy community views him almost like a Cole Kmet type of guy, but he's not. He earns targets better. He earns them a little bit more down the field.
You're so right. That is in my head, Pat Freiermuth and Cole Kmet are just they're just a Venn diagram. They are just totally the same dude to me.
They are similar, but in ways that I think are good for the Pat Freiermuth bull case. Both I think were sort of underrated or underappreciated prospects. They're both early declare guys and second round picks, and then both got on the field right away. But Freiermuth has been efficient where Kmet has never been efficient. Kmet has always been kind of just like a guy who gets the routes. He had 0.93 yards per route run as a rookie, 1.23 last year. He kind of had some breakout buzz last year, and I didn't really get it. I was like, it's just that he's young. That's like the only thing you can really point to with Kmet last year. 1.27 yards per route run last year as part of this extremely run heavy Bears team. Freiermuth is different. I mean, the 1.68 yards per route run is impressive. That's an impressive targets per route run, up above 20%. To be elite, you kind of want more like the 25%, but we see tight ends take big steps in their third year fairly frequently. The other nice thing about him already having flashed as a second-year player is that you can get out after this year because he's still going to be on his rookie deal after the end of the season. So I actually just moved him up as you were talking. I think that was a pretty convincing bull case. I didn't move him as high as you have him, but I just moved him up to 64.
Also had a really underreported injury that he dealt with last year. He opened up the season playing over 80% of the snaps. He gets hurt in week 5. And he just kind of hovers around between 50 and 60% of the snaps for a while. He was on the injury report every single week. Towards the end of the season, he comes back up over 80%. I think that hurt some of his raw stats, but you look at his per route stats, they were really strong. I don't really see a reason why Pat Freiermuth can't be an every down tight end. By all accounts, he's a pretty capable blocker. He was used that way when he wasn't on the injury report. I think that
Yeah, I just think sometimes with certain young players, the upside just doesn't get baked in because we get kind of icked. And I think that's him. I know it's a boring player, but I have been trying to acquire him.
He might be less boring than people think. Like he's entering his third season and he's already earned the ability to be a full-time tight end, which is like the very first thing we need. I'll note we just had Matt Harmon on ADP Chasing, and we were talking through some of the data that he creates when he's charting out these games. One of the things he notes is how often wide receivers are lining up on the line of scrimmage. And something that jumped out to me when I was looking through that is that George Pickens lines up pretty close to like a traditional X receiver amount of, how often he's on the line of scrimmage. But Deontay Johnson is on the line of scrimmage even more. And I was asking him, like, how can that be? Like, I basically thought there's, you get your flankers off the line of scrimmage and your X receivers on the line of scrimmage. But you say Matt Canada does some weird stuff. Sometimes he'll have two outside wide receivers both on the line of scrimmage. That allows him to take his tight end off the line of scrimmage. So I think they're like little things like the way this offense is designed. I'm like, oh, okay, so they're actually making a point so that Freiermuth has more of a clean release on some of these routes, so he doesn't have to play like a more traditional. I think that's kind of interesting. We talk about tight ends in the slot a lot, but to me, I'm like, I don't really care as much if they're in the slot or in line. It's like, are they actually good at receiving? But I do think it's kind of interesting that they're, we don't talk very much about tight ends who don't have to line up in or on the line of scrimmage, and maybe Freiermuth has a minor advantage there. But just a reminder that he is a receiving talent, and I think his team realizes that.
I think he's forever underrated on the basis of he came out in the same draft class as Kyle Pitts too.
Mm-hmm.
Well, shit, yeah, that's got to be and when these guys don't do athletic testing and they don't go in the first round and they land in a spot where that's not really glamorous, like people just like think he's Dalton Schultz too. It's like, oh, he's just a guy. There's no, like, when you think of Chig, you're like, oh, Chig, dude, he's so big, he's so strong, he's so fast. Like, people almost would prefer their dynasty tight end to be the tight end 3 on the team, to start the year when they're drafted, and to know nothing about him other than that he has like a 9.87 RAS. That's like all and then for that guy to break, like, people would rather, if Donald Parham was the starting tight end for the Chargers this year, have Donald Parham than Pat Freiermuth. There's just something about it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I generally think that routes are like, it's one of those things where if you're just focused on the tight ends running routes, you're missing a huge part of the picture. But if you don't care about, okay, but who can actually run routes at an 80% clip, then you're also missing a huge part of the picture. Like, Chigakonkwo is probably going to have a 70% route rate this year, and Pat Freiermuth would probably be like 82 or 83%. And that alone is huge.
How down bad are the Chig bros going to be when Josh Wiley and Kevin Rader are out there blocking because they like have more dog in them than Chig does? And Vrabel's like, I just really like the cut of Alizé Mack's jib, like it just like it's almost like Vrabel.
Is that a real
like,
person?
I think it is.
Yeah, he was a Notre Dame tight end. I want to say he was a Raider. He was like a good preseason DFS guy because he's like more of a pass catcher.
Alizé Max.
But
Bond villain.
Chig in particular feels so fraught. I mean, obviously he's not that expensive right now. Jacob, you're higher on all the young tight ends than Pat and I are.
In fairness, I think I'm also higher on all the old tight ends.
I guess
you're just higher on all the tight ends.
Yeah.
I just like it in tight end premium. Like, I want to have 2 tight end ones. Like, I always want to have one of Kelsey, Pitts, or Andrews if I can, especially Pitts or Andrews. But if I can't, then I really want to have 2 of the next group. I really like Darren Waller. I really like Pat Freiermuth, of course. I'm very, very aggressive about Greg Dulcich. But like, ideally, I want to kind of pair these guys. Like, anytime I don't have one of the top 3, I want Waller and one of the young guys, or 2 of the young guys. And like, I almost want Waller, one of Freiermuth and Njoku, Dulcich, and one of the 2023 rookies. Because again, like, if I'm playing tight end premium, I want to be flexing a tight end a lot of the time, because you're usually getting them at a somewhat comparable cost to wide receivers that are going to score somewhat similarly in tight end premium. But you get a 2-way go. Like, if you get one of these guys, your tight end 2, You can play them. You get the security of being able to play them in tight end if your guy gets injured or is bad, because tight ends just like constantly come and go. And then you also get the benefit of, okay, you just put them in the flex, same difference to wide receiver. So especially in tight end premium, I'm just higher on the position and I want to build a stable because tight end upside does come from unexpected places. And I want as many shots as possible. And tight end downside comes all the time. And I guess I've just been scarred so many times about being week 8 and I thought I had a tight end, but I actually don't have a tight end. And I'm like, pinching 2/3 together to get Tyler Conklin. And like, I want to build depth in my tight end room because it really is a position of scarcity, and it's a position that you can separate if you're able to hit on an upside profile. So I don't know. I think pretty across the board, I'm either close to the highest or the highest, I think, on most of the tight ends.
It's interesting because we're very aligned on the quarterback stuff, but I have tended to play these leagues differently at tight end, where I love to have the elites, but I don't really care about missing out on that sexy young group of up and coming tight ends. So I just pulled up a league that I won in 2021. And I think this is the 2021 roster. I had Dan Arnold, John Bates, Jack Doyle, Tyler Kroft, Jonnu Smith, and Brock Wright as my tight ends that year on a winning team. So like, I guess
This is in premium too.
This is tight end premium. This is Superflex tight end premium. I won this one in 2020 as well, and the tight end room was like no better. So I've just like had success. Let's see. This room was Arnold, Doyle, Eifert, Richard Rodgers, and Jonnu. I just like
Dick Rod.
Yeah, he was a waiver ad. And let's see. I've got another team that finished, I think, 4th. We were the 1 seed. I co-owned this with my brother. We got bounced. But we had Daniel Bellinger, Dallas Goedert on this team. We traded for pretty cheaply in the offseason last year. Kylan Granson, James Mitchell, Jack Stoll, and Robert Tonyan. So like really grow outside of Goddard, who again we got pretty cheaply entering last year. This room was really gross in 2021. I kept it pretty gross. I'm like totally fine with that. Like, and I like in these leagues, I think one of the only things you can find on waiver wires is tight ends, guys who are really gross, kind of fill in options for their actual real NFL teams. You can you can scoop those guys up. You can kind of like just kind of scrape along at tight end. And then if something kind of falls in your lap, where I would say Goddard fell in our lap here, amazing. But if it doesn't, I'm just going to like kind of keep the position barren and like wait for that to happen and keep the vast majority of my capital for my team outside of the position, because it's such a chaotic position. It's a position where people lose a ton of value. We're constantly wrong about who the next tight end is going to be. So
has there ever been a time the market got this right where they were like, this guy is up and coming?
Hawkinson, I think, is one of the few.
No, because there was no dip. What was the dip on Hawkinson? Like Hawkinson's dip was being like the tight end 8, maybe 10.
Well,
I misunderstand the question.
Hawkinson popped once we decided he wasn't going to pop anymore, basically.
Sure. What are you saying then, David?
Like, when was the last time the market picked a Dulcich, Chig, Njoku, and then that guy ascended? That guy became the a guy worth a good first or whatever.
I guess you could say Goddard, but they got bored. People got bored before it really happened.
That's the thing. People do get bored.
They get bored, and I just don't want to. I really don't like. Daniel Jones. I kind of made the bull case on him earlier. I think you could say, Pat, you're buying the top of the market with Daniel Jones, which might be true, but I'm more willing to go ahead and like risk buying the top at quarterback if I have that contract protection, especially, than I am at tight end. Like, I just get nervous. Freiermuth's a slight exception to this. You got me excited about him. But again, I think it helps that he's on that rookie deal. Like I'm definitely way more nervous about these guys like losing the value. Like Dulcich, I like him in best ball this year, but he's the type of guy who could really burn you in Dynasty.
He could really burn you, but like he also could be this Jimmy Graham Joker type. Like the Dulcich payoff is quite good, especially because Kelce, like the tight end one mantle, that removes so much of the equity at the position. Like when Kelce's gone, there's gonna be some good team in your league that just had Travis Kelce that's gonna have to disperse assets to get a new one. Like it just removes, like, because like Noah Gray is not gonna fill in that position and be, we're losing the best guy at the position.
Right.
I mean, the Dulcich case is very different than the Freiermuth case. Like the Freiermuth case for me is like, frankly, it's just that I think he's mispriced, like more than anything. It's not even I'm like, this is the archetype I want to target. It's more just like, I just don't think he's priced appropriately. The Dulcich case for sure. His downside is he's the backup tight end on the Denver Broncos.
Right.
To me, it's more like with Dulcich, it's just a matter of, this is the kind of upside target that we want at a position where a really high upside player matters a ton. And to me, I think he's the best bet, like outside of the elites, to actually be one of the true difference makers at the position. Like you think about, how do we get to these real difference making tight ends? It's the guys that either win deep, they win after the catch, or they catch a bunch of touchdowns in an efficient offense. And it's like, to me, Dulcich, because he has that downfield usage profile, and he was a legitimately super productive college prospect, and he's in a spot that I think has upside. Like I'm not super optimistic about like investing in Russ, specifically in Russ, but I'm pretty optimistic on betting on a Russ breakout by betting on his weapons, where it's like, if Russ sucks, it's not the end of the world, but I also get the benefit if Russ doesn't suck. And you added what Sean Payton has done with tight ends from Jimmy Graham to Jeremy Shockey. It's interesting to me that people were like, he's probably not going to like Greg Dulcich when he's continually targeted this type of tight
I legit
end.
don't think you knew who he was.
Like,
I don't think you'd
right.
I don't think you really watched him.
But like people even before he made that comment, they're like, I don't know if Sean Payton's going to like this guy. And it was like, look at what he did in New Orleans. Like he drafted like a hybrid wide receiver tight end in Marquez Colston. Or I don't even know if he drafted him. I think he signed him. I don't even know if he was a drafted
I think he
player.
did. I think he's a 7th round pick.
Okay. So he targets that type of guy, obviously has a ton of success. They have a ton of success with Jimmy Graham. And then they go out, they sign Kobe Fleener to a legitimate contract. He had like a decent year. Then they go out and get Jared Cook. Like, it's like,
yeah,
he is continually, they haven't all worked out.
All these guys are seam stretchers too.
Exactly. Like this role of like this kind of undersized seam stretching downfield tight end is something he always wants to have in his offense. Like he's continually had it. They've had massive success. When they lose a guy that's been a fixture of their offense, he immediately tries to target another guy. Like, to me, Greg Dulcich is exactly who we would want. And then he only brought in blocking tight ends. So I think he's in a great spot. And I don't think that any of these Denver wide receivers are prohibitive.
The blocking tight ends could just play over him if Sean Payton decides. I got real sick of watching Eric Tomlinson and Andrew Beck run routes last year as a noted Alberto backer.
Sure, but they didn't run them over Greg Dulcich.
No, they didn't.
Greg Dulcich came in and started running 80% of the routes. And I guess that's my question is like, to me, to believe that Adam Troutman is going to be playing, like, to believe that Greg Dulcich is not going to be the receiving tight end for the Broncos is to believe that Sean Payton will operate an offense that doesn't emphasize a receiving tight end, which is never how Sean Payton has operated an offense. So I just think that it's unlikely. I don't think it's impossible, but if Sean Payton is going to run the type of offense that he has always ran, it involves a type of player that is Greg Dulcich, and Greg Dulcich seems to be very good at it. So I'm optimistic, but I mean, I was all over Dulcich as a prospect, so I'm still like
me too
holding. But
yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. I have him at 105. You have him at 96. Davis is at 120. So we're not like wildly apart there. Even it's just more like philosophically, I'm just more like I want to play it like that. Like I want to go get Greg Dulcich very cheaply. Go get Pat Freiermuth very cheaply. Cole Kmet very cheaply. None of these guys cost really anything in rookie drafts. You could do that this year as well as another deep tight end class. I want to play it like that and then just kind of have the guy. Anytime I need to go like try to trade for a tight end, I feel like people always want an arm and a leg for a tight end. They usually want a tight end back. It's a very like kind of a liquid market. I don't like I don't really like participating in the tight end trade market as much as I can avoid it. I have a team that the same
Well,
league
that's why I ranked them so highly, so I don't ever have to trade for one.
You mean in the in the startup? You want to see? Yeah.
Like I don't
see what
really
you're
ever
saying.
trade for
I see
tight
what you're
ends
saying.
generally, but I draft them aggressively in rookie drafts and I draft them aggressively in startups, and then I have the tight ends that I have.
I'm
And
more
then
into
if I
them
trade
in
for a
rookie
tight end, it's
drafts
like
where
throw in Noah Fant instead of a third. That's like how I trade for tight ends.
Okay.
Or it's I'm trading for
I like
Travis
that.
Kelce.
See, I really like buying Kmet because one, I think
It's so
Kmet,
bad.
I don't think he's that bad. I mean,
He is
maybe he
bad.
is. Maybe he
Cole
is.
Kmet is a pretty funny one that you brought up. I will let you go on him in a second, but I am so ahead of all of you on every tight end except for Cole Kmet, who Davis has at 111, Pat has at 131, and I have at 178.
I'm very high on him. One, because I think he's going to earn targets decently. I mean, he scored touchdowns last year. Maybe he's just not a target earner. Maybe I'm wrong.
He's not.
Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I guess my
I
thought
like how
was,
Davis is. You're supposed to make the bull case, and then we're supposed to talk you out of it. Not make the bull case and go.
my bull case would be is like he's a lock to be on the field 90% of the time and is gonna be on this offense that if so like that we just talked about the super bear case for Fields, but like if Fields does, because Fields is fun, and if Fields does evolve as a passer and is not eating sacks like rice cakes or whatever, I mean this dude like I feel like the market is going to be pretty in on this Bears offense. I mean, obviously he could just go like Hayden Hurst, like he could just be a guy who bounces around and signs like 2-year, $8 million deals with a bunch of different teams for the rest of his career. I
think you got to get out of like just go get Michael Mayer, reset.
Sure.
I
think that's a good point.
He's an unrestricted free agent after the year Cole Kmet, and he hasn't been good. That to me is just like get out. Like you're gonna lose the value. What do you even have, other than just like routes? So go get another guy who's gonna run.
Is he
routes.
even gonna get the routes? Like is he even the best receiving tight end on the Bears? Like they signed Robert Tonyan. Like I don't know that Cole Kmet has Cole Kmet last year was on the worst wide receiver depth chart in the entire NFL. He had an 8 out of 7, which is 22nd among tight ends. And he had a 16% targets per route run on an 8 out of 7 next to Darnell Mooney and Equanimous St. Brown. Like I just don't think that he's it. That's just I just think that he's not very good.
Yeah, and
he's probably not very good.
He's sort of probably an example. I probably have him even too high because he's sort of an example of what I really am trying to avoid as like paying anything just to fill routes. If I want to go just try to and paying anything just to like fill the position for me that week, like I want to keep costs extremely low at the tight end position unless I'm getting an elite. I had an opportunity a few years ago to trade for Gronkowski. He was winding down, unfortunately, but it's like, hey, it's Rob Gronkowski. Shoot your shot. See if you can actually get him back to the unbelievable difference maker that he was. And I traded away like Gary Barnidge and some pieces to go get him. So arguably I still won the trade, even though I never became Gronk again. But like that type, this isn't tight end premium, but I got Kelce at a buy low moment, and it completely, made that team for years. So like getting the elites, I have no issue with. I think Mark Andrews is probably a little bit undervalued right now.
Yes.
But I really don't want to pay for just run-of-the-mill production at tight end because it goes away so quickly. It's such a chaotic position. Evan Ingram would be another really kind of just emblematic of this whole thing for me.
Yeah,
like,
that's
why would I ever pay for Evan Ingram?
Yeah, and I mean, I think I actually, I guess I do have him ranked ahead of you guys, but I think I'm like below the market more on Evan Ingram and like Dalton Schultz compared to where I am on like a Dulcich and a Freiermuth and those guys. Like I'm definitely less into that tier. Like I would rather just maybe not than Ingram, but like I would rather just have Luke Musgrave than Cole Kmet.
Right.
Like I would just rather take the shot personally. You're totally right about Ingram, which is hilarious because I was about as all in on Ingram last year as I've ever been
then.
on a player. But now it's like, we won. Let's collect our winnings.
Cash out.
Let's right. Like I have no interest in like being at the Evan Ingram slot machine and pulling another time. Like I think we got all we were going to get out of that.
Yeah, and I think people like maybe underestimate just how much you're asking for when you kind of have, and maybe you're not saying that out loud even, but when you're like, I got Greg Dulcich and he could be anything, you know, he could emerge as the next guy. Like for Greg Dulcich to become Mark Andrews is such a tiny sliver of a chance. All of this stuff is so thin because one thing that tight end has is it does actually, although these guys injury rates and stuff are an issue at tight end, but there's like usually 3 to 4 players who are legit difference makers at the position. And they're often the same guys year over year. There's just very few guys who ever emerge as elite contributors at the position. Especially in a consistent way outside of like a random Gary Barnidge type outcome. So your more likely scenario is that, you know, you get kind of like a Hawkinson-y dude or someone who's scoring more consistently like Dulcich has over the last couple of years. But to get the true elite outcome, I'm always trying to think through. Dulcich isn't a great example of this because I think he's actually pretty fine. But I'm always trying to look at the guys who's priced like they have a 20% chance of becoming Mark Andrews when they really probably have like a 5% chance.
Yeah, that's fair.
Michael Mayer.
Well, not anymore, right? He's pretty free now.
Yeah, that was the way that the draft played out was deeply upsetting to me as a pre-draft Kincaid TE1 person. Was really disappointing to not actually get to realize anything for those efforts. But I mean, that's the one, like Dalton Kincaid, like I'm actually the highest of us all on Kincaid, but like that's a tough sell, right? I mean, that's a guy who probably has a 5% chance of being Mark Andrews in his price. Like he has a 70% chance of being Mark Andrews.
That's exactly the type of guy that I will almost always be below market on.
I found myself taking Kincaid finally in Best Ball Mania because he's falling down to like the 12th now.
I get him in the 12th
enough where I will take him if I've already taken Josh Allen.
That's exactly where I'm at. I'm now stacking with Allen sometimes.
He left from the full X to the only in stacks tier. Also, because like I would just never take Dalton Kincaid when I can take Greg Dulcich, and not a dynasty take at all, not a managed take even. But like I also just think Dalton Schultz is like a pretty strong value in best ball, which is a gross thing to say, but I guess that goes right next to Pat's Robert Woods take, right in the same offense. Totally so I feel like a lot better with Schultz. So I don't know. I haven't been taking Kincaid much in best ball other than now I will take him for Allen stacks. It's not that infrequent anymore that he's available after Schultz and Dulcich.
All right.
Once we're into like Gerald Everett, sure.
I just think like so much of this comes down to you're asking these guys to either be an NFL level slot receiver at like 250 pounds, which is crazy difficult. Or, and this is one of the reasons I tend not to get excited about the Mike Gesicki types. Oh, he plays in the slot. Like, oh, that's amazing. So what? Like, you know who's good at playing in the slot? Slot receivers. Like they like it's still very difficult for him to be out there and run routes at a full-time level. You know, he actually has to be awesome. The other, like in some ways, I prefer the inline guys because they don't need to be competing against, you know, they're doing something that an NFL wide receiver can't really do, which is like block a linebacker. So, you know, the inline guys who then can become receivers, I think in some ways are more interesting or at least more undervalued. But you're talking about, okay, at 260 pounds, you know, be awesome at blocking dudes and be awesome at running routes. It's just such a difficult thing. That's why only a handful of guys get there. And so if I'm just sort of betting against these dudes like ever doing it, especially when they're priced like they're going to, and I'm instead, I do like to take shots on the position, but I want to just keep it cheap. And, you know, go get the guys in the late second round of rookie drafts, early third round of rookie drafts where Dulcich was. You could get Dulcich for this. I mean, this is what he was priced as. So I think I just don't really want to have to pay up. Kincaid is probably the best example of a dude that I'm not going to pay up for.
I mean, just draft Luke Musgrave today. He's going to be the starting tight end for the Green Bay Packers. He is athletic.
Draft Tucker Kraft too.
And he goes in the third round. And draft Tucker Kraft. Those are like both Musgrave and Kraft are in my top 4 most drafted rookies. Like Pat hit the nail on the head when he was talking about how like illiquid it is. Like it's really hard to trade for tight ends. Like despite my way over market Freiermuth ranking, I actually don't even have that much Pat Freiermuth because like it's really hard. Like there's a lot of teams I don't really need to trade for him. The teams that I would have a use for him, a lot of times people are like, no, I'm good. So it's like, what am I going to do? Like, I'm going to try to do like Goddard for Freiermuth plus or Kittle for Freiermuth plus and get like a little bit more of a plus than I think there should be. Like the circumstances in which I can actually facilitate that trade are so narrow that, for the most part, it's like I have a lot of Dulcich because I drafted him a lot in rookie drafts. Like I have a lot of Njoku because I picked him up when he was for pennies. Like we'll see if guys like, that hit. But yeah, I agree. Like I would rather bet on that archetype too than like the Chig. Like I think, and I had a lot of Chig. I took them a lot in like rookie drafts, like the 4th, 5th round. But yeah, I mean, teams don't usually make 6'2" tight ends 80% route participation players because how is he going to play in 11 personnel? It's a tough sell for me.
All right, let's end with this. Or go ahead, Pat.
Well, we're kind of on the topic of some of these like guys you can get for pennies, and I just want to get your guys' thoughts on those guys, like who, because I'll throw out you mentioned Noah Fant, so I'll leave him, but Dawson Knox would be a guy who I think makes for a great. Are you, Jacob? You're the most active of us, I think, certainly more than me in the trade market. Are you seeing him move around a lot? Are you able to get him?
I mean, usually with these tight ends, like
usually to get a tight end like a Knox or a Fant, what it usually is like you're negotiating a larger deal and then you tell them to throw the guy in because like for any time you have a player that's ranked this lowly, it's like if you just send an offer for that player, then that just kind of perturbs the other manager because they're like, oh, they really want my Noah Fant. Like I guess I'm going to upcharge them. So I've bought actually 9 shares of Noah Fant this offseason. But none of them were like for Noah Fant. Every one of them was like a bigger deal. And then it was like, I just need a little bit more. Can you throw in Noah Fant? I have not gone that aggressively at Knox, but I do think that's a really good one. And I imagine it would be a similar scenario because Herbert's like, what are you going to send for Knox now? It's like, you're going to send a 3rd round pick. The person's like, no, I'll just keep Knox, but you're not going to send a 2nd round pick for Dawson Knox.
No.
So it's like, I don't know, like maybe you can go and be like, here's this wide receiver that you don't need. Well, it might be easier in season because like in season, what you can do is like team has a running back injury. You're sitting on Chuba Hubbard and Miles Sanders sprains an ankle, but you're good at running back. You don't need Chuba Hubbard that week. You go to the guy and you say, hey, do you need a running back fill in? I'll give you Chuba Hubbard. That'll be Dawson Knox in a 2026 third. And the guy's like, yeah, sure. Right. And that's where I think it's like a good chance to get in a lot of those guys is in season when you trade the fairly useless player that is of service to another person that week. You get back a fairly useless player that is not of service to them that week. And you also get a 3rd round pick for consideration.
Okay.
I like that.
Let's end with this. We have to choose our 2023 Gary Barnidge. Let's call it guy who is it could be a guy who's unranked, a guy who is outside of our top 150 even. So it can be guys that we have already discussed here, but we got to give our 2023 Gary Barnidge. I know exactly who it's going to be. So I'll go last because I've already peered into the crystal ball and I already know who it is.
Oh man.
I can go.
Go for it.
Cade Otton.
Cade Otton is such a good one. Cade Otton,
gross.
Cade Otton is such a good. Mine is in a very similar vein to Pat's. So, but yes, Pat clearly understood the assignment here.
Cade Otton, 2nd-year tight end, who's the veteran of the room. They literally brought in like a bunch of other dudes who are somehow younger than Cade Otton, and they were talking him up in terms of his veteran leadership entering his 2nd season. Was productive when he was out on the field. He's a Cole Kmet essentially, but What you might have with Otten compared to Kmet is that they're throwing a ton because they're so bad. You probably need a trade here for him to be a Barnidge, but I do take him in best ball and stuff because I'm just like, look, a ton of underneath garbage time passing attempts. That could be a tight end very easily. A Kyle Trask, I think, might help him. It's just a pocket passer, get the ball out type. So we run hot on touchdowns. We get a ton of team attempts. He lucks into an 18% targets per route run, and that's enough. That's enough.
All right, can you outgross Cade Otton, Jacob?
I think that I might be able to. This is one of my top 5 most drafted tight ends on Underdog. And his name is Hayden Hurst. Hayden Hurst had a 17% targets per out run last year, was actually outpacing Tyler Boyd, and he now lands on a depth chart in which Tyler Boyd would clearly be the best wide receiver if he was traded there today.
That's true.
He got an actual contract. Like, he got over $20 million total, and I believe it was $13 million guaranteed. Horrible depth chart. Going to be a team that you project to be playing from behind a decent amount. He's going to be running a lot of nice bunny routes for Bryce Young. Probably not going to be a big scrambler. Probably a guy who's going to be willing to check it down. And you know who's not actually a 3-down back? Miles Sanders. Miles Sanders had a 0.28 yards per out run. They want to make him a 3-down back. They are woefully mistaken. So those checkdowns are not going to the running backs. They're not going to DJ Chark. They're not going to Terrace Marshall. Hayden Hurst is going to be just enveloping up and gobbling up those targets. I think he has a great chance to honestly, I think he has a pretty legitimate opportunity to potentially lead the Carolina Panthers in targets if he's able to run 80% of routes. So that's my concern with Hayden Hurst because of the Frank Wright tight end rotation.
He had,
but who else is
rotation.
There? They gave him so much money.
Well, they have that dude. They have one of the guys who's
Tommy
like a legit
Tremble.
Yeah, but Tremble's a blocker. So that's what concerns me. Is Hurst is there. He's 65% route rate guy, and then Tremble's blocking enough to hurt.
But are they going to be that committed to playing 11 personnel with the wide receivers that they have?
Yeah, that's fair. That's definitely
fair. I don't know. If you want to bet on Adam Thielen being dust and not worthy of a 12th round pick, I submit Hayden Hurst. That's all. He actually earned. I don't know if earned is the right word, but he received targets at a pretty impressive rate for 17% targets per route run next to Chase, Higgins, and Boyd with how much they throw to running backs was he was legitimately used. I could see that 17% number get up to 19-20% this year in an extremely favorable environment for target earning.
All right. Well, you guys both. Cade Otton is pretty good. The Hayden Hurst, I can't get there just because I expect Carolina to not have enough passes available. But the real answer is Jake Ferguson. Jake Ferguson is going to Barnidge his fucking way to 800 yards and 6 touchdowns, and it's every step of it is going to be painful. You're never, if you have Ferguson, let's say you have Ferguson on a high stakes team, you're never going to be able to tell the difference between him and Hendershot. Because Ferguson wears 84 and Hendershot wears 87. They're the exact same size. They have different hair, but you can't tell when they have the helmet on. So it's going to be, and then Schoonmaker is going to come in, and you're not going to be able to tell the difference between him either. They're all going to look the same, but it's going to be Jake Henderson doing a late stage Jacob Tammy rumble bumble, and it is fait accompli.
You just combined their names. You called him Jake Henderson, which is a combination of Hendershot and Ferguson.
Because they are indistinguishable, but Ferguson is the better blocker, which is just going to give him more snaps. And all the beat writers have already said Schoonmaker's OTA injury, basically just sealed this up. Ferguson is just going to have to play, and he's also got upside if Cooks has a concussion, if Michael Gallup, in fact, everyone thinks he's going to be way better this year, but he was really bad last year. And if that's his same baseline, there's going to be more targets, less very inefficient red zone rush attempts to Zeke. It's all spelled out. Jake Ferguson is Gary Barnidge. It is what it is.
I would say that's a better pick than Cade Otton because I just pulled up Gary Barnidge's line. I mean, it is wild
You don't even believe it when you look at his Pro Football Reference page. It feels like someone's pranking you.
It's truly crazy. So he had 13 receptions in 2013, 13 receptions in 2014. Those were both career highs to that point. And then in 2015, he went 79 for 1,043 and 9 touchdowns on 125
and he was
targets.
30. He was 30. This was not a spray. He was 30. Well, he was out of the NFL within 2 years.
The even crazier one, and this was the one guy that I forgot to mention with Greg Dulcich, but was 35-year-old Benjamin Watson in his 12th NFL season, put up 110 targets, 74 for 825 and 6 with the Saints.
Oh my God, I forgot about that, dude.
At age 35, forgot about that. Year 12. And he had like one kind of sort of season with Cleveland, like 6 years prior. And other than that, it was just straight Nothingsville. And then he went nuts. And he too was shortly out of the NFL. But the Barnidge season, Logan Thomas season will soon be remembered in that way.
This is a
the Logan Thomas was a Barnidge, I think, unfortunately.
It was, yeah. Okay.
Unless he is your Gary Barnidge for 2023.
We're gonna end it with this.
He's on the list.
I'm gonna go find ADP from 2016. So this is Fantasy Football Calculator's ADP. Where do we think Gary Barnidge was drafted the year after that season?
Probably like the 6th round.
He was the 82nd overall player, the 708. Gary Barnidge was drafted ahead of Zach Ertz. Ertz and Julius Thomas.
Oh no.
Well, Julius Thomas was like pretty close to a Barnidge. Like he had what, 2 years?
Yeah, he was.
And it was all Peyton Manning driven. He was doing nothing. He was doing no part of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, Owen Daniels could have had the exact same season that Julius Thomas had if he had been there during that year.
Antonio Gates was still hanging around at this point. We're just naming guys now. I love naming guys. All right, this is it's been a 2.5 hour podcast on quarterbacks and tight ends.
Light work.
Guys, make sure that you are subscribed to Legendary Upside. Make sure that you are subscribed to Thinking About Thinking and listening to the SportsGrid Fantasy Football Podcast. And we will be back next week with a mailbag episode. So if you check Crane's Twitter, he'll tell you where to send those questions. And thanks for listening.